Anybody have anything they want to peel off consent?
No.
Okay, good. Jane, you have those proclamations? Yeah, but I just see they're out of, oh, I didn't look deep enough.
I kept the 3 of them.
EMS, let's see, what's first here? All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 16, 2017 meeting of the Edina City Council. Roll call, please. Ms. Tim?
Member Brindle?
Here.
Member Fisher?
Here.
Member Staunton?
Here.
Member Stewart?
Here.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the agenda in any form or fashion? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as shown.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Next, community comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda as shown. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Special recognitions and presentations. First one, we've got 3 proclamations this evening, and the first one is Emergency Medical Services Week, and I see the fire chief is here. And I will read that proclamation as follows. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of the emergency medical services teams of the Edina Fire and Police Departments are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival rate and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas the emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system of Edina consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas emergency medical services responders of the Edina Fire and Police Departments engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas the citizens of the city of Edina benefit daily from the knowledge and skills of these highly trained individuals. And whereas injury prevention and appropriate use of the emergency medical services system will help reduce healthcare costs. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of the Edina Fire and Police emergency medical services providers who serve to protect us by designating Emergency Medical Week. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the City Council of the City of Edina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st to the 27th, 2017 as Emergency Medical Services Week, EMS Strong, always in service, in the City of Edina, in honor and recognition of the valuable contributions made by the Edina emergency medical services providers to the health and well-being of our residents. Is there a motion to adopt the proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the proclamation. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Chief, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. And again, thank you for adopting that proclamation. We're very proud of our EMS system here in Edina. I really think it's top notch. Both Dave and I are very impressed with the people that serve our community every day. I just wanted to give you some statistics from 2016 as it relates to our EMS activity here in the city of Edina. Last year, our dispatchers received, police officers responded, firefighters responded, and paramedics responded to 4,315 emergency calls related to EMS. The top 4 conditions for those calls were, number 1 was trauma. And when people hear the word trauma, they think Edina has a knife and gun club. We don't. All right, we very rarely do we have those types of runs. But falls fall under trauma. And we have a lot of slips, trips, and falls, and broken hips, and other related types of fractures. So trauma is our number 1. The next most common type of call we respond to is weakness. And then after that is dyspnea or shortness of breath, and then cardiacs. So that's pretty consistent with kind of what Edina is known for, hips and hearts. Last year, our Medic 3, we staffed 2 medic units 24/7, and when staffing allows, we will bring a 3rd ambulance online. Last year, that ambulance went out the door 132 times. That number continues to increase every single year. We received mutual aid from neighboring ambulance services 110 times, and we went to other neighboring communities to help them 108 times. So it's a pretty good balance of them coming in and us going out. Our patients generally get to choose which hospital that they want to go to. Obviously, severity and type of injury, we would maybe take them to a trauma center or a burn center. But for the most part, the patient gets to pick. And last year, most of our patients went to Southdale Hospital, 61% of them, the next Methodist, and then following that, Abbott Northwestern. Last year, we responded to 24 cardiac arrests, and that's a pretty typical year for us. 20 of those patients fell into the CARES criteria for the Epstein study, and of that, 10 of those patients, 50% of them, we were able to get return of spontaneous circulation, which is a big marker for us in pre-hospital. If we can get a heart rate back and potentially patient breathing and deliver them to the hospital, they have a good chance of making it. So 50%, that's pretty good for us. We're very proud of that number. So with that, one of the biggest increasing run volumes that we are seeing are psychiatric calls. In the last 7 years, that number has gone up 134%, and we continue to see that increase every single day in this community. So with that, again, I just want to thank you and for adopting the proclamation. If you have any questions, I'd be free to answer those.
That last data point, Chief, are you seeing that increase in any particular age group or cohort?
I would say it's across the board, all age groups. Yep.
Okay. Other questions for the Chief?
Could you,
Member Fisher?
I'm sorry, what were you calling that last one? I missed.
Psychiatric emergencies.
Oh, psychiatric. I didn't quite. Okay, thank you.
Manager Neal.
You know, just to add a little bit to what Chief Schmitz was talking about, we referenced at the council meeting last week, or at our last council meeting, the Novak study about staffing and service levels. You know, at its core, we are really good at these services, at police services and at EMS services and fire services, because we have strong people. It's a people-based business. You can add a lot of technology and tools to it, but at its core, it's a people-based business. And we've got some folks in the back of the room who are responsible for that kind of field-level service. And one of the things we're good at, not only individually, but working together, is a real strength that residents get here because of the way the chiefs work together and because of the way the departments work together.
All right, good. Chief, I'm going to walk down with the proclamation.
Great.
I'm
I'll
assuming
ask my
that,
responders to come on up and join us for the picture. Dispatch 2.
Crystal.
There we, I had my turn.
What's up? Can you get a photo? You guys want to come up as well?
We have our week.
There we.
That's good.
The next proclamation involves National Public Works Week, and our Public Works Director, Brian Olson, is here to receive this proclamation. That proclamation reads as follows: whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs such as water, sewers, and streets, and whereas the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works officials, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, I, James B. Hovland, Mayor of the City of Edina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21 through 27, 2017 as National Public Works Week in the City of Edina, and I call upon all citizens and civic organizations in the City of Edina to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Is there a motion to adopt that proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. Mr. Olson, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for also reading the proclamation on behalf of the over 30,000 public works professionals and engineers throughout the continent that provide the infrastructure that allows us the quality of life that we enjoy. This year, the National APWA is celebrating the theme, Public Works Connects Us. For the past 57 years, National Public Works Week has been designed to educate communities and their leaders about the importance of our nation's public works professionals. This week also serves as a time to recognize the contributions of public works staff who design, build, plan, operate, and maintain the infrastructure and facilities essential to the nation's economy and quality of life. Their dedication and expertise at all levels of government are a capital investment in the economic growth, development, and ultimate stability of the nation. This proclamation is important for the Edina Public Works Department and engineering departments to honor those who devote their lives to this service. Whether it's the water system that delivers safe and clean drinking water, the sewers that drain our city after a rain, or the streets that we drive, each of these systems have to work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Here in Edina, we're blessed with a pretty good track record. We have a great reliability that is second to none. 99.993% of the time it operates flawlessly. This simply would not be possible without the dedication and pride of the men and women in the public works and engineering departments of this community. So thank you for recognizing National Public Works Week, and with that, the Edina Public Works and Engineering Departments.
Good, thank you. Any questions, comments for Director Olson? You guys are doing wonderful work over there, and Manager Neal has something.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about this team as well. They have a lot more, they have as many tools as our public safety group do, but it's also a people-based business too. You hear a lot about their service levels in the winter, and that comes out very clearly on all of our surveys, how skilled they are in moving snow off of our streets. But really, when you think about all the other things they do all year long, it helps keep us civilized and a level of quality of life that we wouldn't ordinarily have here. So we're pretty lucky to have them as well.
Thank you for those comments. Member Brindle.
Thank you. You know, it's a small thing, but when I'm at the Public Works building, along the wall, along the hallway, as you walk through the building to the meeting room in the back, is this row of posters from Public Works Weeks over the years. They are the coolest posters. They're really artistic. So next time you're there, take a moment to look at them, because they're really works of art. But it is a great reminder for the great work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Member Fisher.
I just would make the comment that, you know, the word efficiency has come up a couple times, and, you know, engineering, and you think of that, public works and efficient services, and oftentimes, you know, it's the invisible things that get done. But I can't help but notice that in this proclamation there are far fewer whereases, and very precise, and I think it fits. So I'm just going to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking
he's
when I was
not
back
gonna
there
run
listening
himself.
to all the whereases for the National EMS Week that we needed to work on our proclamation a little bit.
Well, I think, as Manager Neal said, the Quality of Life Survey, I think it's repeatedly shown, at least the last couple of times we've taken it, that we're #1 in Minnesota in snow plowing. So our residents hold you in high regard for that work that you do. I'm going to walk down and hand you this proclamation, and thank you for coming this evening.
We don't take snow plowing lightly in Edina.
One of the only services we touch the life of every community member when it snows.
In our last proclamation of the evening, Susan Foss from Park and Rec is here to receive that, and this proclamation deals with National Kids to Parks Day, excuse me, which is Saturday, May 20, 2017. Too many whereases, I guess. Whereas May 20th, 2017 is the 7th National Kids to Parks Day, organized and launched by the National Park Trust. And whereas National Kids to Parks Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks. And whereas it is important to introduce a new generation to our nation's parks because of the decline in park attendance over the last decades. And whereas we should encourage children to lead a more active lifestyle to combat the issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and hypercholesterolemia. Pretty close. And whereas National Kids to Parks Day is open to all children and adults across the country to encourage a large and diverse group of participants. And whereas National Kids to Parks Day will broaden children's appreciation for nature and the outdoors. Now, therefore, the Edina City Council does hereby proclaim to participate in National Kids to Parks Day. The City Council of Edina urges residents to participate and get out and visit a park in our community on National Kids to Parks Day, Saturday, May 20th, 2017. Is there a motion to adopt the proclamation?
So moved, second.
All right. Is there a motion and a second to adopt the proclamation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion is carried. Proclamation carried. Ms. Faust.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm staring at that word. I should be able to. It has a few
challenging
syllables in it, but I should be able to manage it. I don't know.
Well, Mayor and council members, thank you for adopting the proclamation for National Kids to Park Day. Getting kids involved at an early age, recreating, getting them outside is such an important initiative for our field, and recognizing this is really important. This year, our department is using this event to really promote outdoor activity and getting kids out and enjoying our Edina parks. So we're really encouraging residents to get outside, find their favorite park, and choose one of the great activities to do in the parks. We're also hosting a photo challenge on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, where the neighborhood park that submits the most photos will win the contest, and the best picture taken in that neighborhood will be recognized in the next issue, in the June issue of Edition Edina. So get out before Saturday, play pickleball, play tennis, choose your favorite event, go for a walk, and snap a photo. It's hashtag Edina Parks.
And if you want to go for a walk, you can come and walk with the mayor at 9 o'clock at Centennial Lakes, 9 a.m. That would be a good way to do it.
Thank you.
Hypercholesterolemia is the word. I'm going to come down here and hand this to you. Hypercholesterolemia. Screw that up next year. All right, next we have our own Kaylin Idness, our Senior Communications Coordinator, is going to handle the Speak Up Edina presentation for this month.
Mayor, council members, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm here to present our monthly Speak Up Edina conversation for April. In April, we focused on organics recycling. The questions that we asked were the three following questions. Are you tackling food waste in your home? If so, how? Some examples we gave: backyard compost, arrangement through refuse haulers, or nothing right now. If you're not recycling food waste, what's preventing you from doing so, and what would encourage you to recycle food waste? And if you are recycling organics, what did you think at first might be difficult or a barrier, but wasn't after all? The discussion was open April 1st through April 30th. 78 comments were made. We had 490 new visitors to the site, a total of 542 total visitors, with roughly 1,800 page views, and all of the commenters were from Edina. Some common themes that we picked out, some residents, actually this was a lot of residents were interested in the city hosting on an organic drop site. Some other cities in the area, Twin Cities, have an organics drop-off site. Some people said encourage all refuse haulers to provide organics recycling options, or just make organics recycling available to all residents. Those who have VeerCant love it. There were a lot of VeerCant fans who participated in this conversation. Only allow those who have organics recycling to service Edina, or there were a couple of these comments in there too where they segued to only allow one refuse hauler to service all of Edina. And I know in the past we've featured a Speak Up discussion on that, but that came into the conversation, especially after Bloomington recently did it. And people also brought up St. Louis Park, how they recently started organics recycling for all of their residents. A lot of people were grateful for the countertop buckets that the Health Division has been giving out this year, and we also used this conversation as another tool to promote those buckets. I think we have probably like 50 left, and we started with a few hundred, so they've been going pretty well. Some concerns people had about organics recycling were pests getting into the food, some smells or some rotten food in their house. But a lot of people who were concerned about this, it necessarily didn't end up being a big deal. This is one of the answers to the question of what at first did you think would be a barrier but wasn't after all. These are some of the things, but they found that they weren't really the case. And then lastly, some residents said the city should encourage businesses to participate in organics recycling and also multifamily housing. We had the organics recycling as a topic in April to work toward Hennepin County's goal of reducing reducing trash by increasing organics recycling. 22% of household waste is actually organic material, and that doesn't just include food. That is paper products, Kleenex, paper plates, and other. The list is so big. And a lot of people who commented on this conversation also spoke about how their trash has gone down considerably since they started organics recycling with those who have VeerCant. Do you guys have any questions about organics recycling and the conversation in April?
Member Brindle?
I guess the question that begs to be asked is, what can we do to encourage the other haulers? Since we only have one hauler that includes organics recycling in their service menu, and residents hire their own haulers, what can we do as a city? Because a hauler has to be approved. There's some process of approval. And I guess one, I'd like to know what we can do. I suppose one thing we can do is say, we will prioritize haulers that include organics recycling as one of their services. And so that may help them to speed up including organics recycling in their service. But I guess that would be one thing that I suppose we would pose that to our sanitation department. But it appears to be an important question.
It does. I think the conversation that we saw in April was definitely, there's a lot of interest in organics recycling.
The other question I have is, how well do we publicize the list of what is organically recyclable? Because those of us who don't use that hauler don't have that list. So maybe that can come out from the city, and we who don't use Gary Vierkant can find some other way to recycle our organics.
Yeah, we did some promotion about what you can and cannot recycle as far as organics go. When we started giving out those buckets, we made magnets that we hand out with the buckets.
Oh, okay.
And we also made a brochure, and the information's on our website. But we haven't separately promoted just what organics can be recycled, but it's something to definitely keep in mind.
Good. All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Manager Neal?
Thank you, Your Honor. In reference to Councilmember Brindle's question about how can we do this, there are some ways that we could take that issue on about trying to encourage more haulers to provide that service. One could be through our licensing program. We license haulers in the city. We could require, as a matter of getting a city license, that they provide that service to their customers. That's one way to do it. But the fact is, we're going to have to increase our attention to this particular topic very soon. The mayor and I, a couple of weeks ago, attended a meeting called by our county commissioner, Jan Callison, where we talked about the targets that Hennepin County is going to set for all the individual cities, and really just started the conversation about how we're going to do it, what part we play in that process. So it's an ongoing discussion, but it's going to get more serious in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the target being that we want 75% of what's produced in the house, from a trash standpoint, gets recycled in some form or fashion.
Great.
Member Fisher?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for once again, doing a nice job on the survey. It really caused me to think about this whole, garbage hauling thing. And the first question is, how can we do exactly that, require it? And I realize I know very little, and I don't know if this council, as it's constituted, has dealt with our garbage hauling, reviewing sort of that whole process.
Well, we like to walk around.
Oh, I know we do.
Yeah.
But it's always bothered me that, here you talk about we're going to make a big difference by how much organics are being, but yet, how many companies are driving big trucks up and down our streets that we're spending millions of dollars redoing? We're all paying for that. All the fuel that's being burned, all of that stuff, it's all part of a big sustainability picture in my mind. And I know it's a really tough topic. It's dicey and all that, but it feels like you don't just solve organics. It's got to be a bigger equation.
And I think that's why some people did bring up having a single hauler, but it is a big conversation to have. Any other questions or comments?
Other questions, comments?
All right, next month we're gonna, or I guess this month, the conversation is on water conservation. Water usage in the summer goes up and increases greatly. So we're just kind of getting a feel for what residents are doing to conserve water, especially in the summertime.
Good topic.
Yep. Thank you so much, you guys.
All right, thank you, Kaylin. All right, we're going to move on to the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda, and the first item there is, I think, Director Milner, are you going to take this, the Southeast Edina preliminary engineering report on the sanitary sewer planning work that we've been doing?
Yeah, Mayor, members of council, thank you. We're super excited to present the results of the Southeast Sanitary Sewer Study. It's a great study, and I'd like to recognize the work completed by Ross and then Brian Lamone and Sarah Stratton's team at Bar Engineering. Seems like with every potential project, we get the question of whether or not our infrastructure can handle the proposed project. This study helps answer that question. We were also able to get some great feedback and direction from Met Council to help guide the results of the study and our future planning. So with that, I'll hand it over to Brian and Ross.
All right, thanks, Director Milner. Mr. Bentner, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. My name is Brian Lamont. I work for Bar Engineering, and I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity this evening to share with you the results of the Southeast Edina Sanitary Sewer Comprehensive Planning Project. I'm going to talk a little bit early on about the technical components that went into the study, some of the problems that we found, and then some of the solutions that we came up with. And these are problems relative to future development and that solutions that will prevent them from becoming a problem at the time. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ross, and he's going to cover some of the conclusions and next steps. So what is the plan? What's the big picture? Why are we looking at your sanitary sewer system? Well, as all of you know, there's a significant amount of redevelopment going on in this area of Edina, especially down around the Southdale area. And we want to be able to provide tools to the public works professionals so that they can plan for and then construct some of the sanitary sewer expansions that are needed to help serve the development that is occurring down in that area. And with the emphasis on providing some tools so that we can predict what might occur as redevelopment happens. So what did we do? How did we get to that point? Well, we sat down early on with the city planners and looked at 3 horizons of planning. Rather than just look at an ultimate design scenario, we looked at a 5-year horizon to see how much development is likely to occur in the near term. The planners have a significant amount of information about some of the development that's planned for the near term, a little bit more information about the farther out in the 5-year plan. Then as you get out of 10-year, you know a little bit less about it, but you still have some ideas of what may be going on. And then we looked at the ultimate potential capacity issues. In the ultimate one, we looked at 3 different scenarios: a low density, a medium density, and a high density, because obviously as you get further out, you know a little bit less about what might be going on, and we wanted to give kind of a range of analysis so that as we're looking at the solutions to the problem, we don't pick one end and miss the other end. We wanted to make sure we covered that. So that's the information that went into the model. And then you might say, well, what is the planning tool that we're using? Well, it's a sanitary sewer model, and as you can see on your screen, it's a series of circles and lines, kind of boring. Well, what is that? Well, that's a computer program that actually routes sanitary sewer flows throughout the city to the outlet, which is shown in the right there, where you see way over on the right side of the drawing, you see that 129. Well, this is just a series of circles and lines. Well, where is it? Well, it's actually, as you can see there, that's the sewer system that's serving that portion of Edina. You can see on there some of the Park Lawn area, the Centennial Lakes area, and again, your ultimate outlet, which is over there at 129, which is, by the way, those outlets are managed. City of Edina is responsible for getting sewage to the edges of the city. Once it makes it to the edge of the city, the Met Council takes over with their interceptors and moves it on down to the sewage treatment plants that handle it from that point on. So then how do we create a sewer model? Well, if you think about it, all of the water you sell to your residents in January and February, particularly in the winter months, virtually all of that makes it into your sewer. Very little of it, you're not watering your lawns at that point, you're not washing your cars outside typically. All of that makes it into the sewer system. Your city has wonderful records for all of the water that is sold. In fact, you just recently upgraded all your water meters so that you have even more accurate information about all the water that you sell to your customers. So we take that information and actually input it into the sanitary sewer model at the exact locations geographically where it's generated. The model then enters that flow, and you can see the curve on the right side of the drawing there. That's called a diurnal curve. If you can imagine the amount of sewage going into your system, it's not at a constant rate throughout the day. Middle of the night, there's very little sewage going into the system. That's that low part of the curve. As everybody gets up to shower and head into work, the use spikes, and then it goes off, drops down a little bit during the day, peaks again a little bit as people are coming home from work, and then again drops off in the evening. The model takes all of this into account and routes the flows throughout the system. And to make sure we're getting it right, we then go out and put a number of meters out into the actual system, measure the flow, and then compare what the model is saying is being produced at a given location to what the meters measured. So the drawing on the right there is a graph that shows in blue the actual measured flow that we saw at a given location in Edina, and then the tan line that's slightly on top of it in many cases and a little bit higher in others, a little bit lower in others, is what the model had predicted. Now, they're not right on top of each other, but that's actually a very accurate model. The level of calibration of this model was very high. So what does that mean? Well, that means we now have a tool that we can use to predict what might happen as we change some of the uses, as some of the development changes. In other words, what you're seeing is a lot of parking lots or single-story buildings being turned into apartment buildings, multi-story apartment buildings, basically a higher density of use that creates more sanitary sewer flow. Well, you want to make sure that you can provide service to that redevelopment as it's occurring, and that's what the model is used for. The drawing that's shown in the center there, the picture, you see a bunch of green lines on there, some yellow lines and some red lines. Each of those lines graphically represents a sanitary sewer that's in your system. I'm a believer in what I call the stoplight method of presenting data. If you're seeing green on the map, you're seeing sewers that have plenty of capacity, everything's good, there's nothing to worry about. You see yellow, you're seeing pipes that are a little bit fuller, still not a problem, just, fuller. You start seeing red, now you're seeing pipes that are potentially very full. Not necessarily a problem, but at least it's telling you, hey, we should go take a look at this and make sure that there's enough service here. And if they're, some pipes are designed to flow full, others are not, but the red points out a place where we should take a look at it. So what did we do then? Well, we input the data from the projected future growth that I mentioned earlier, the 5-year, the 10-year horizon, and then the ultimate design capacities. And what did we come up with? On here now you're seeing a map that's split in half. Hopefully you recognize it. On the right side is the southeasternmost portion of Edina. You can see the park lawn area, and that area is circled in kind of a pinkish circle. You'll understand that in a moment. You see again on the right side there, that arrow pointing out is the actual interceptor where the sewage is being carried to. And then on the left side there you see the northern portion of the southeast Edina. In that area you see 2 areas circled, Fairview and Southdale. Now you do see quite a few red pipes on this map. That's showing some of the ultimate analysis that was done for the future development. And so we were basically saying, okay, there's some problems here. Let's go look at them, let's see what's causing them, and then let's come up with some solutions. So you can see up in the Fairview area, as development is going to occur in that area, some of the local pipes shown in red are going to start to be at or above capacity. And in addition, they flow to the outlet to Met Council there, that's RF 490, that's the way they name their interceptors. That interceptor has capacity for your service right now, but if we were to route all of this sewage to it from all the redevelopment that's planned ultimately, there would likely be some problems. Not a problem now, but there could be in the future if all the redevelopment isn't handled appropriately. Now on the next one, you're going to see Southdale. Quite a few red pipes there. As you guys know, there's plenty of redevelopment occurring right around the Southdale area. And the local pipes you're seeing shown there that would serve Southdale down York and across 69th running to the west, the sewage actually flows north to south on the east side of Southdale and then across to the west. And then it flows down into the trunk. And then those trunk pipes then take in flow from the north. And again, this flow is routed out to that southern MCES interceptor that I mentioned earlier. Those are getting close to capacity here again from this future development. The last area we're going to talk about a little bit is the park lawn area. Actually, my office is shown right down there. It's just a little bit off to the side there. And so our flow from our building actually goes into this area as well. That area goes to what's Lift Station 6, and Lift Station 6 then flows over to the trunk pipes that I mentioned earlier. It actually joins up with some of the flow from Southdale. Now, all of this is creating a couple areas, these 3 areas that are somewhat choke points or concerns for future development. And I want to point out it's ultimate future development here that's the concern, not the immediate anything in the near term. So how are we going to solve these problems? Well, there's a goal. The goal here is to bring the excess flow to that RF 491 that I mentioned earlier. And the reason is, you might recall several years back, MCES routed a second sanitary sewer interceptor to your eastern border, your southeastern border. That was a couple years back, essentially doubling the amount of capacity that they could serve in this area because they too saw some of the growth that you've been seeing. So in order to address the capacity issues that we identified in those 3 areas, we've come up with several solutions, and you're going to see them in the next few slides. Phase 1 would be to extend a trunk sewer from the north down to the south along York to capture the flow from the Southdale area, and then move it over to Xerxes down to that outlet that we noted that from Met Council. If that goes in first, you then are essentially bringing excess capacity up to the Fairview area. And you can see that you would install some new pipes in that area and then route it down to the pipe that had been installed up York. And I want to point out that the solutions that we're proposing here are not to replace your existing sanitary sewers. In fact, what we're proposing here is to put in a parallel or a secondary sewer that would take flow in from the new development. A lot of the existing flow would continue to go to the existing sanitary sewer which has capacity to handle the existing pipes or the existing flow. These new pipes would be going in to handle the redevelopment or the new flow. And then the final area that we mentioned here is Park Lawn. That currently goes to Lift Station 6. We looked at an option to upgrade Lift Station 6 and the force main coming out of there. It's pretty expensive to do that, so what we ended up coming up with is a solution that actually installs a new lift station and routes that by a force main, again, over to the same discharge area for Met Council. Well, once we've proposed these solutions, we wanted to make sure that they would work, and so we put these pipes into the model that I mentioned to you earlier, and then checked to see whether or not we would have lots of red and orange pipes, or if we would have green pipes. And as you see, we have a bunch of happy sanitary sewer pipes that are green with these solutions. So hopefully this will give you some of a kind of an insight to what went into the analysis and the planning. And I'm going to turn it over now to Ross, where he's going to cover some of the key findings.
Mayor and Council, I have to say it's a relief to be at this stage. Chad and I, as we see new development coming in and opportunities to synchronize our projects, we already kind of feel the relief of knowing what some of the answers could be. I think the answer, the product that we produce now is one that's bracketed so that we understand kind of a low, medium, and high range. It's something that we have to kind of continue the discussion with as you continue through your comp planning process. And we continue translating that vision into flow and infrastructure and coordinating with the Met Council and keeping that close coordination going. The conclusions that we've come up with are Edina is very well served by the existing infrastructure. A lot of it is well utilized. You're selling the available capacity. Some high water industrial use is using a lot of the capacity. Ample capacity is available at that border for growth. And it's something that it's a slow ship to turn, and it's a long-term planning process. In 2008, the existing comp plan that we see on our desk today, there were kind of some broad green lines on the map that said you're going to have to start thinking about capacity here. Now, as we see that current level of development playing itself out, those decisions are nearer. All that ongoing work that we're doing right now for infiltration and inflow work continues to free up capacity, and we have general flow decreases in the system due to conservation. But this is a story of local demand growth, which is very solvable. You can bring the sanitary sewers up, thousands of feet rather than many miles. So we have time to react. As that growing demand causes that local capacity constraint, we have to start bringing those trunk lines up and into the city. The development fees that are currently being captured at the point of development are paying for this new infrastructure. We have in our rate study revenue, and we're timing those developments as they come in. Eventually, we have to start making big enough jumps where the city has to take a little bit of risk, but even at the current level of development, the infrastructure is really well supported. And this infrastructure decision-making is very long-term and needs thorough planning. So on that theme, continuing to balance this growing demand service with the existing work we're doing with renewing the old aging infrastructure where it doesn't need capacity increases, and reducing risks through our infiltration and inflow program. This is, we have kind of those three baskets for the types of projects we do in sanitary sewer infrastructure work, and you're going to see it coming out in the next 5-year CIP and 10-year plan. That comprehensive plan update with the Met Council as you start to settle on land use decisions, checking this again and reformulating the work we did here for it's currently the Chapter 8, but the Water Resources chapter of the comp plan will be important. Phase 1, the capacity relief on York, that's where we really have to start. It frees up capacity once you get north of 69th Street on even the France Avenue corridor. So the benefit starts to attribute to areas that right now serve 3/4 of the city. And we have now a lot clearer direction from the Met Council at meter 128 or RF 490 on that 65th and Xerxes area near the hospital. They've given us clear direction that flow growth is unwanted there and that we have to start shuttling that flow south. So that's another relief to have that answer. So we're going to continue that close coordination with the Met Council through the comprehensive planning process. Part of that phase 1 is already ordered and underway. That was what got us our answers a lot sooner than many communities may. We've included, we will include options for the Southdale phase 1 in the 5-year CIP, and depending on the rate of development, we can move those up or back to kind of manage the risk. And as we see other opportunities go in, nearby development that may be along the routes, other potential transportation needs, other projects that may also impact one of these areas, we may be opportunistic about also putting in capacity increase where we're already opening up a road system. So it feels good to be at this step. We look forward to getting through the comp planning process and finalizing it and putting in a good plan that is well supported by the current level of development.
Thank you. Member Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions as I was going through here. Maybe you could help me understand a couple of things. In the report, there were 5 different scenarios that were described. Is there one of those that you think is the most likely outcome for identifying our needs?
There may have been more than 5 scenarios described. Oh, it's for the growth side.
Yes.
Right. So we described the 2 as...
For example, 2 was existing with a 10-year redevelopment, or 5 was ultimate high density.
I did a little work to compare the current level of development and the current comp plan densities with what we're seeing in the field and what our scenarios kind of model in at. And I'd say we're kind of on track right now. Well, we hit all the ranges with the developments. The Best Buy site, NV, and then the 65th Medical Aurora building. Those were both on the higher side of the range, maybe in the mid-density development. Some of the others that maybe span a little bit more area are probably sliding in on the low. I've been comparing as we have drafts of this for the hospital site, and that one was up above the top of the high-end range. So, they're slotting in different places in that development curve, but it's, we have the ability to be flexible with the capacity.
So as we, what I want to get to, as you then created some cost ranges for what we're likely to need to spend to do some of these upgrades. For example, there were 3 different Fairview, and so for just the region on the map described as Fairview 1, Fairview 2, or Fairview 3, there were some ranges. Do those comport with one of those particular scenarios, or how does that work? I'm just trying to understand how they work together.
Right. When we came to the cost estimation, we had to choose one of the scenarios to design to, and I think we chose, somewhere around the mid-density development. But when it comes to the total cost of any one of those projects, only a small portion of the project cost actually goes into the size of the pipe. A lot of the other costs are fixed with opening up the street and putting it back together. So generally, the cost estimate, it wasn't very sensitive to what size of pipe you have to put in, and improvements were needed for every level of development.
Right. And once you open up the street, is it more cost effective to, and I don't know if a redundancy is helpful in these scenarios, is it better to replace a smaller pipe with a larger pipe to increase your capacity, or is it just as good to have a second pipe next to the first pipe and then you've got some redundancy in your system?
I think it's highly geographic in what strategy you choose. We looked at options, at least for the Southdale, where we would upsize the existing pipe, but having another pipe in place side by side gives you that operational flexibility. So I'd say the latter.
It could be either in some cases. Okay. And then, you had these 3 Fairview scenarios, the most expensive of which was 11.3 million. For the Southdale, you had Southdale 4 and Southdale 5 cost ranges. The most expensive of those was 16.5 million. And then Park Lawn 6 and Park Lawn 7, the most expensive of those was 20 million. If I add the most expensive options for all 3 of those together, that's just shy of $48 million. Would it be likely we might need to do that much?
No, don't do that.
Okay, that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Yep. So the options that we presented here on the screen today were Southdale 4, Fairview 1, and Park Lawn 6. And the estimates are a very conceptual range. So we kind of have a minus 50% plus 100. So we're still, we're at the 50,000 foot level. We have actual costs coming in on the Xerxes. And the costs look like they're sliding in very favorably at about the engineer's estimate, or 20 to 30% below this level of estimate.
Below the top of the range.
Yeah. So when I added up the cost of the preferred options, it was 8.2 at Southdale, 4.3 at Fairview, 4.2 at Park Lawn for 16.
Okay, 16 to 17 million. Yeah. And then, so if we need to spend 16 to 17 million, we need to do that over the next 5 years, or how long?
So that's one of those things that I think it is a slow ship, and we want to make sure we're managing that risk. A lot of the benefit comes when we get to 69th and Xerxes with the Southdale option. So that's kind of the first target. And right now, I'm not comfortable saying when that's going to be, but I would say over the course of the next 15 years, you would see a lot of Southdale and Fairview options done based on just the current level of development. But you have kind of a 3-year window as projects come in, they get approved. We do have some lead time.
But you think we may need to spend this, let's call it $17 million over
15 years? 15
years. So if we had $1.25 million on average built into the budget over those 15 years, we ought to be able to pay for the need that we're likely to have. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's where I think we need to do a little bit more work sharpening our pencil on the development fees and how much they're generating. So what I've done is I've started to kind of take some of the areas that those current developments that are already entitled that they're slotting in at in terms of total rec fees. Right now our rec is at $1,070 for 1 unit. So I did an example for Millennium, and Millennium is in 2 phases, 372 units that generates 217 net new SAC units or rec units, and that's the measurement that the Met Council comes up with. So that project itself comes up with $380,000 worth of capital charges to offset this type of development. That project takes up 5 acres, and the whole Fairview option serves about 56 acres. That area looks to me like the development pays for the capital cost.
Okay. And so I'm going to combine a couple of things here and tell me if I'm doing it wrong. Everything we've been talking about now is really regards to capacity, right? So it feels to me like we also have to worry about aging of some of this infrastructure. And I know there are all kinds of advances in technology for how to line pipes so you don't have to replace them and do some other things. Are we likely to have a need to replace some aging infrastructure at some point that may hit us, and what kind of costs are we looking at there?
Yes, we have the need to replace aging infrastructure and renew the existing sanitary infrastructure. And just for the sanitary program, if you look at the capital improvement plan over the next 5 years, there's a few $1 million projects that we're working on the mini trunk line where we're lining a pipe that's over 70 years old. So that work is still taking place, and it takes place kind of with the funding sources that are generated as part of the sanitary utility. So that program doesn't stop to wait for development.
Well, and you and your team have done such a great job historically that all of these things are really invisible to everybody in our city, because when it works, nobody notices. It's when it doesn't work that people would notice very quickly. So my inclination on these kinds of infrastructure issues is to be very conservative. And in that sense, I mean, I would like to make sure that we do all that we can to maintain our infrastructure, our sanitary sewer infrastructure. We do everything we can to build to the kind of capacity that we need. And it's not sexy. It's not something anybody's going to notice. In fact, best if they don't notice, right? Because then it's working. But I think it's something that's a very important function that we perform as a city, and I want to make sure that we stay on top of it. So thank you for doing this work. Thank you for giving us a heads up on where this is likely to go, and help us stay as a first-class operation in this regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Fisher.
So can I ask a question about, you talked about a pump station, I think it would be the one just south of Cornelia School, that you might need another pump station. Are you talking about that location, potentially redundancy?
If you look at the slide that's on the screen right now, I can note the location that you're drawing attention to. The largest lift station in the system is lift station 6. Here's the Cornelia School. This serves about 3/4 of the community all the way up to the northwest border. We're not proposing, we looked at one of those options where we would expand the capacity of that and improve the downstream system. It didn't cost out. So the alternative for this park lawn phase is to actually intercept some of the growth that's happening west of France in the park lawn area and provide a secondary lift station that takes that intercepted flow and shuttles it west along a sanitary easement south of the Macy's site through the promenade to Yorktown Park, where it links up with the Southdale gravity option.
Okay. If you just leave that graphic up for a minute, my last comment will be, first of all, I never thought I would say a report like this would be interesting, but it was really kind of interesting. Because as Councilmember Stewart said, usually we just don't think of this stuff. And I think about the comment that it's better to be lucky than good. You represent the good, right? And we do really good work, and we have for a long time. But what struck me out of all of this, reading this report, is that we're also lucky. I mean, the Met Council happened, where their trunk line takes off and where they're servicing the whole, metro area, just happens to take off from the corner of our community where the vast majority of our redevelopment is going to happen. I mean, if it just happened that it was leaving from the northwest side of our community, wouldn't this be a bit of a different picture cost-wise? If we were redeveloping on the southeast corner and had to run this all the way across our community?
Yes, and other communities are struggling with that right now.
They must be, because not everyone can have just that corner that they happen to be. And so I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, we're really not only good, but really lucky. So.
Other comments? Member Brindle?
Thank you. Just a couple things. There is a new water treatment plant that's going to be built in the southwest corner of the Southdale parking lot near the water tower. Now, these are separate systems. I understand that this is the sanitary sewer, but we are increasing we may be increasing the amount of water over there by having at least the amount of water that's immediately available to that area by having a new water treatment plant and possibly a second pump in the area of the Galleria. Am I understanding that correctly? Because isn't there a pump near Galleria now? What's that building in the middle of 69th Street?
Yeah, that's a well house.
It's a well house. It's part of the water system.
Is that a pump?
Yep.
There's probably a bump or two in there, I guess.
Okay, but it's a well.
Yeah, it's a well.
Okay, I guess I'm mixing my words. So a second well based on the capacity that's needed over there. So just looking at capacity, when I read this, I'm thinking, okay, well, if it's a parallel system, then if one gets full, then it can flow into the other one. Is there any ability for one of these parallel systems to offload the other if one has capacity?
Not a lot, but if you look at the slide that's on your screen right now, the park lawn option does that, and to the extent that you're in a situation, our sanitary sewer systems, when they're at their most risky is when you're having a really strong rain event.
Right.
And if that pipe from lift station 6 backs up, you could potentially size this so that it could also shuttle flows in an alternate way. Lift station 6, I have an opportunity now to promote an upcoming infrastructure tour. Make sure you're slotting in August 10th at 5 o'clock or 6 to 7:30. We're going to be bringing Transportation Commission, City Council, Planning Commission, and the Energy Environment Commission. We're going to be inviting you out, and you can see the deep sanitary sewer systems and really nerd out with the engineers. I think the other answer to the question is at 69th in York.
Yeah.
As we start to pull off the flow from that currently heads west on 69th, we'll have ample capacity in that existing line because more than half the line is now heading down a new system. So they work in tandem.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. Well, and one of my questions was the 100-year rainfall, which we had 2014, and we may well have sooner than 100 years. And the sanitary sewers were part of the problem with just the amount of stormwater. There were heroic efforts putting out as many sandbags as could be filled as fast as they could be filled. But we still, if memory serves me correct, we averted a lot of trouble, but we might, if I recall correctly, have run into some trouble. So does creating this parallel system, does that give us more protection against that?
In a way, yes, but it's not protection that you want to use or pay for. And I'll explain that because the Met Council has a meter at the end of this system, and they have financial tools in their program. When we send a large peak that's over and above what's expected, and that happens in a storm event, we get fined and charged. So to the extent that the system limits that ability to even transmit the flow, you kind of limit your upper side risk. We are managing that risk through our infiltration and inflow reduction program. And a lot of the work that's happening there are through the renewal of aging infrastructure, lining manholes, lining old pieces of system, but also through our redevelopment program where new development is coming in. And we're a lot better at setting elevation control on garages and other areas that have the potential in old development to take in a lot of sanitary flow and cause those overflows. So that's another one of those slow ships to turn where you've got to make sure you're getting the right answer every time a development comes in the door. And another product that's actually some of the same team members from BARS helping us out. And you'll be seeing that product through our comprehensive water resource management plan that's going to be rolling out in its draft form sometime in the next 5 or 6 months.
Councilmember Brindle, I'll just add one thing to that. With the I&I and the risk during storms, we still only control about half of the sanitary sewer pipes. The other half are private pipes where they're getting I&I in on each individual residential property. So while we can make improvements on our trunk pipes and provide additional capacity, we have a lot less control and basically zero control on those private pipes, which make up about half of the pipes in the ground, so.
All right.
And those,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and those policy options we haven't really dug into in great detail yet, but there are options to start limiting that risk as well.
All right. Sack and whack fees. If this redundant line was not necessary, new developments have sack and whack fees, right? With the new line, are sack and whack fees going to be more than they would have been without that redundant line?
So that's a question that we've chosen to answer every time we do a rate study. So when we're looking at the capital needs here, we've been putting that in the capital plan, and then over the course of time, we run another rate study. We've generally been trying to manage that in our capital requests.
Right.
But to the extent that the development, is really pressing us to, speed that timeline up, or it happens all in an area that's, way up in the Fairview option, it may force a little bit more front loading of that. That could change some of the capital planning, but without knowing, where the next development's going to come in, we actually have a tool now to help start, judging and answering those questions where we never had in the past.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of items that I wanted to touch on that I forgot when I spoke the first time, so forgive me for coming back. Some of the things I'm about to say work against our business of selling water, as you described it, but we have also undertaken to be a community that values sustainability and to build in some sustainability in all aspects of our civic works. So to the extent we can reduce our consumption of water as a community, I realize we will have less revenue from our sale of water, but we'll also have less water that goes down the drain and needs to be treated through the sanitary sewer system. And we get charged less by the county or Met Council when we pass it on to them, right? So there are some economic benefits to reducing the amount of water that we consume. And I know we've made efforts to be more efficient in our use of water. Have those had a measurable effect on the sort of capacity issues that we're talking about today, or is it really not big enough to talk about?
I'd say the answer is yes, and I think a lot of that long-term demand reduction that we've been seeing has bought us the time we've had up until now. On sustainability, if you were to try to press a strategy of demand reduction, it really only attributes benefit to small portions of the system, and far out and in the last part of the trunk system. So there's not a real capital benefit to that, but to the extent that we're using less water, we have to spin our pumps less. So there's savings on both the water side and on the sanitary side,
yep.
and energy savings, which have some carbon side. But generally, the cost structure for utility, that doesn't move the needle a lot on cost because it's so much fixed capital.
Do you think there's room for us to make significant more strides in terms of our water consumption efficiency, or at some point I imagine there's sort of a law of diminishing returns on just how efficient one can get?
So we have a stated goal, and this is probably a conversation that we can get into a lot more in our water planning process, which is also forthcoming, but we have a stated goal to get down to 75 gallons per capita per day, and we're above that right now. But the national and state policies on water conservation are slowly bringing us closer to that goal.
And if we do achieve some significant reductions, does it change what we need to do in terms of this plan?
No.
Not much. Okay. Thank you.
Just a couple of quick comments. So When we asked you to take a look at this in November of 2015, staff, start thinking about what we're going to be dealing with as we anticipate future development needs or demands within the Southdale District. You responded very well, Bar. Thank you. Excellent work, excellent presentation. So when we think about our capacity below the street, determining the redevelopment capability at grade level and in the air above, this is critically important, as my colleagues have said. I join Member Stewart in saying we may not have seen anything yet, and in our lifetime things may change again. We've seen requests for density, dwelling units per acre jump significantly in the Southdale District to the point where we had to go back to the Met Council and ask to have our comprehensive plan amended to increase our density capacity in that area that can handle increased density. So we're going to see other projects coming that are going to be like Gateway at 96 units per acre, Millennium was 60, the Onyx 52. I mean, we're going to see some things in that 50 to maybe 120 range like they're seeing in downtown Minneapolis. So I just want to make sure that when we do this, we do it right. And we do it the Edina way, we do it right. And we anticipate that capacity that we're going to need for the next 50 years. And how to pay for it is a whole nother discussion I can see coming as we look at all this joint development work that we're going to do with developers, particularly in that part of town that's going to need more capacity. We might want to think about some creative ways to look at some of that financing that would include those development partners of ours that are wanting to develop projects out there. So give that some thought as well, and maybe our finance people can as well. Manager Neal? Is that something that you've seen in other communities?
Well, it certainly is. I mean, that is the question that gets back to something that you've all raised, and that is whether you do this with SAC or WAC payments to new entrants into the community. If you don't do that, you do it on the backs of all the ratepayers who are connected to that system. And it's really all about these large capital projects. It's all about who pays. Is it past customers or future customers or current customers? And there are a lot of value statements that go into creating that kind of system. So we do plan to have that discussion with you later this year.
All right, good. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. And thank you, Mr. LeBron.
Thank you very much.
Lamont, excuse me. Yeah, very good. All right, park signage replacement is the next matter up in front of us and this portion of our agenda. Susan Faust has this matter.
It'll be just a minute. I had my presentation. Here we go.
There it is.
There it is. All right, well, good evening. I am here to present the design that's being recommended to replace all of the main park entrance signs. And I'm excited to be here to show it to you. I just wanted to provide some background information. In June of 2015, City Council approved the allocation of $500,000 of park dedication funds for this project. In October of 2016, Council approved the request for purchase for design services with sign crafters. And really, we started to kick off this project the beginning of January. We formed a park signage committee that was made up of Parks and Recreation Commission members Corin Nelson, Michael Miller, and Trevor Mose, along with city staff in our Communications and Technologies Department, Jennifer Benarott and Katie Laux, from the Parks and Recreation Department, Ann Catry, myself, along with Bob Prestrud from Park Maintenance. And you'll see here from the next two slides that, there was a lot of thought, a lot of discussion, a lot of feedback that went into making this recommendation. The Parks and Recreation Commission provided feedback at the January, February, March, and April meetings. At the May meeting last week, Parks and Recreation Commissioners provided a review and comment, and those comments were provided in the staff report in your packets tonight. Overall, the goals of this project were really simple: to be able to replace all of the main park entrance signs within our project budget. We also wanted to develop a sign plan for each park that included wayfinding and directional signage. The design objectives were to, again, design a sign that was in the project budget, design a sign that was vandalism and graffiti resistant, to use natural colors that would blend in and not kind of blend into the surroundings and not stand out, use materials that would withstand the elements in time, and recommend a design that followed the City of Edina branding guidelines and the city's sign regulations. And we believe that the sign that we're recommending incorporates those objectives. The materials being recommended in the design are materials that are currently used in some of our park facilities. Specifically, the cedar posts and the black buckle fasteners are currently used in the new shelter buildings at Pamela Park and at Countryside. You know, again, there was a lot of discussion, and in your packets, I provided a lot of the design options that were considered throughout the process. We really wanted to incorporate the land and stone. That was something that's kind of signature Edina. They did come up with several design options, but just unfortunately, the cost of the material and the cost of the installation kind of put us out of our project budget. So the materials in this sign, and these would be at our neighborhood and community parks. As you know, our parks are classified community parks, neighborhood parks, and mini parks, really based on size and acreage. The larger parks are community and neighborhood parks. The actual sign would be made of an aluminum panel. The color would be similar to the color that's outside on the City Hall building, and the same as the new electronic sign at the Braemar Golf Course. The logo would be a cast aluminum plaque that would stand out from the sign. And then the name of the parks would be an aluminum cutout. So again, it would kind of stand away from the sign to really, I think, highlight the names of the parks.
When you say it stands away from the sign, do you mean it's raised?
Yes, yeah, yep,
Okay.
raised.
Thank you.
Yep, and then the address bar, all of the signs would include the address, the park address, which we currently don't have. The signs would be designed to be two-sided, and if we get to that installation part, when we look at installing, we would place them more perpendicular as opposed to the current orientation. Right now, the signs are, when you're driving by, they're hard to read, so we'd have to look at that.
Are they reflective so that when you go by at 5 o'clock on a winter day, you can read it?
Well, we're hoping that you will be able to read it. There shouldn't be any glare, if that's what the concern is, too much from the lettering on the signs.
Some signs are easier to read in your headlights when you're driving in the dark, and sometimes they're harder to read. I'm hoping these would be easier to read. So,
Member Brindle?
Thank you. Okay, so the Braemar sign is there with the stone, with messages. So that is going to be a sign that's unique among the park signs?
No, Member Brindle, that's a great question. So our enterprise facility signs they were not included in this project. So when we get to the point when we're able to replace the signs at our enterprise facilities, they would look more like that Braemar, the Braemar sign that has the stone, and then use that same color material.
So the sign at Roslyn Park, which includes the art center, then would be that sort of sign? because they have messages.
Yeah.
If it were working, they would have messages.
Yeah, that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's Member Brindle's point. Is that going to be, because that's an enterprise where the pool is that a sign that looks more like the new sign at Braemar Golf Course?
That right now, the proposed design would be the design that's on the screen. It would not be an electronic sign there. But when we get to the point for the aquatic center, I would see, depending upon what happens in the future with our art center, I would see that being more of probably a combined or a shared electronic sign at some point in the future.
Well, it's really three things in that one park. It's Roslyn Park with the aquatic center and with the art center. And so if we're looking at the sign style at Braemar as being for the enterprises, then I would expect that to be for where the art center sign would be that, and the aquatic center sign would be that.
Yeah. And in a future, if we had a future project budget.
So that's not even on the table at this point.
I guess I won't say it's not on the table. I think depending upon where the bids come in, if there is money to spend, that could be an option. I know there was also has been a request from the Edina Garden Council and the Historical Society to also have an electronic sign for Arneson Acres.
Oh,
but
okay.
but it could be an option, but it isn't. That part of it is not included in this plan.
Okay.
So just to be clear, the enterprises would select their own signs when they want to have it, and it comes out of their own budget?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And it may or may not, the aquatic facility could have a sign that either looks a lot like the one at Braemar or looks nothing at all like the one at Braemar?
No, we would have set sign, we would have set sign guidelines.
Okay.
So the enterprise signs would look the same. They would just say Braemar Arena or Edina Aquatic Center.
There's
think
got
is
to
the
be some
plan.
commonality
Yeah,
in
that
terms
was
of
the
design
point of my
themes.
question.
Yeah, and
is
that's
that it would be different, and it's different because it's an enterprise.
Yeah, and we really want to carry out by using the same materials where we can. So when someone drives into a park and they see the colors, the materials, they're going to know they're in an Edina park. And we would hope the same for one of our enterprise facilities.
All right, with regard to the cedar posts, they eventually need to be replaced. So looking at the sign, which I went by to take a picture of today, and thank you for taking it down, at Braemar, because it's kind of been leaning, and so it's now gone and probably in a scrap pile somewhere. But I would like to make sure that we get to these before they start leaning.
Yeah, the life expectancy on the treated cedar is about 20 years. I don't know the exact time when the original park signs were installed, but I think it's 30-some plus years.
Yeah.
So,
and admittedly, we haven't been good at going out and replacing them and standing them upright, but it is something that just
should
needs
plan
to be
for.
done. Yeah, needs to be part of maintenance. That's all I have. Thank you.
Member Fisher.
So I just have so I think it looks great. Just a curiosity. Was there any discussion about the whole address bar? Because, when you're doing Google Maps or whatever and you're looking up a park, great thing about parks is you kind of know when you hit it, right? And so when it says the name of the park, what was the thinking about the value of having the address there?
a couple items came up in conversation. Number one is, I believe, for safety for police and fire, with the new code, we need to have the address on the signs. And secondly, there's a lot of parents that are coming in for sporting events, and they like to just punch in the address and they can have navigation. So those were the two kind of discussion points there.
See, I knew there'd be a really good answer to that. Thank you.
I like the idea of some of our parks being branded with signage, like what we did at Braemar Golf Course. I think Braemar Ice Arena should have a sign like that, of that quality. It can maybe cover both the Braemar Ice Arena and the Dome. Arneson Acres, I think we could probably actually get a contribution from the Garden Council for that one. And then another one that I think it'd be important to use a significant sign on would be Fred Richards, even though it's not technically anymore an enterprise because it's not a golf course any longer. But I guess it bothers me that we've got a $500,000 pool of funds here made available by the fact that we had a subdivision that a developer requested, and we ended up with $500,000 to use. And we can't do both kinds of signage. You know, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be trying to accomplish through this $500,000 the appropriate signage for the enterprise units plus Fred Richards, and then accomplish this other signage other places throughout our system. It seems to me that there ought to be enough money somehow in the budget to do that. So what's the estimated cost of all this signage as is, without thinking about the land and stone based signage?
Yeah,
$475.
Yeah, so as proposed, 475,000. And like I said, that does not include any signage for any of our enterprise facilities. You know, we have a total of, right now, 46 main park entrance signs. We are recommending a few additional signs at some secondary entrances. There are some parks, some neighborhood and community parks, that you have your main entrance where more vehicle traffic is entering, and then you have some of the entrances where it's off a neighborhood street, where people are walking in, biking in. We plan to have a secondary entrance signs in those locations. The signs are a little less expensive. In these signs, they don't have that address bar, and that's how we're able to afford essentially all of the signs to replace what we have. We have a lot of signs in all of the parks.
So a park that would be that would have a secondary entrance would be Pamela?
Pamela, the parking lot area off, is it Brookview? By the playground.
Yeah.
Could be one. Another good example is Todd Park. The main sign would be on that, close to that intersection of Vandervork and Division.
Okay.
And then there's in the northeast corner is a park entrance where it's mainly just people walking in. So that would be a good example.
Well, Pamela, you've also got 58th and 60th or 62nd, whatever it is over there.
Yeah, we're proposing 3. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think it's a good looking sign. I would just join Member Brindle in saying, maybe think about that post issue. I mean, it seems with that, I like that strap iron.
Yeah.
Maybe you could see what it looks like with a strap iron post or something that's black metal.
And we talked about doing steel posts to replace the treated cedar. It actually was a request by our park maintenance division. They felt like it would withstand the weed whipping a little bit better. But I think just overall, the feedback from the Parks and Recreation Commission, they like the look of the wood, and again, trying to tie into some of our existing park features. But that could be an option.
Yeah. So 20 years from now, whoever is here is on a $500,000 maintenance cycle because everything's going in at the same time. It's all going to wear out at the same time.
Yep. You know, the nice thing too about this design, there are some pieces that could be replaced. So the aluminum panel, you could take off the brackets and that whole piece could be replaced if somehow it were damaged. And same with the cedar posts. They could be replaced if for some reason they were damaged.
That's the part that I look at. I actually think the strategy makes sense, is that it's a renewable resource. You can actually, 15 years from now, if one of them's damaged, you can replace it and the whole sign still kind of works. So I think that incremental approach to maintenance would actually be easier with this.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Manager Neal.
We will do our very best to stretch this project budget as far as we can stretch it. I think the other thing we can do is try to be opportunistic in how we identify money for these future enterprise signs as well. That's how we got this sum of money to do this project in the first place. So we'll keep looking for it, and we'll bring additional ideas back to the council. But we want to have first-class signage for these parks as well.
Yep, good. I think that's a common goal. Is there a motion to approve the proposed design for the main park entrance signs?
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Foss.
Thank you.
All right. On to the main event. Sketch plan review. Director Teague.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As mentioned, we have a sketch plan before you where the City Council is asked to provide non-binding comments for a potential future development project, more focusing on the big picture rather than the details of the project, such as the use, the density, whether it meets our comprehensive plan and zoning. So this site is a redevelopment of the bus garage site. The applicant here is proposing to do a senior housing project. This project would require a comprehensive plan amendment in regard to density. This area is guided for a maximum density of 75 units an acre. This project would be a little over 100 units an acre. It would also take a rezoning. It's currently zoned planned to industrial district. Rezoning to PUD is contemplated here. The applicant did go before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission had several concerns, a lot of concerns. They have revised the plans that were submitted to the Planning Commission. Not significant changes. The amount of the units were decreased from 180 to 165. The FAR was reduced slightly from 2.6 to 2.4. But with that, I will stop there and let the applicant present the project to you. So with that, I will introduce Grady Hamilton and Johnny Carlson from Trammell Crow, and they also have Aaron Rosseth from ESG.
All right, and Director Teague, did you discuss with Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Carlson the amount of time we would spend on this matter?
In kind of our tradition for the applicant presentation in that 15 to 20 minute range, and then discussion after.
Does that sound
Thank
familiar?
you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Hamilton, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff. We appreciate the opportunity tonight to discuss our proposed project at the bus garage site. I'm Grady Hamilton with Trammell Crow Company. Joining me tonight are Johnny Carlson, also with Trammell Crow Company, Aaron Rosseth, Gretchen Camp, and Lucas Van Sistine with ESG Architects, Jesse Simon-Kawitz, our landscape architect with Damon Farber, and John Libby, our civil engineer with Kimley Horn. Before we begin our presentation of the revised design that Mr. Teague spoke of, I will give just a quick background on Trammell Crow Company and some of our recent work in and around Minneapolis. Then I'll provide a little more detail regarding the proposed use. And then lastly, before turning it over to Aaron to present our project design, I'll provide a little background on the process we're in the midst of, as well as some site context details. So first, Trammell Crow Company. We've been in business since 1948. We develop property throughout the country out of 16 offices, and we're currently active in office, industrial, multifamily, retail, and healthcare developments. For the last 3 years, we've been regarded as the nation's most active developer across all product types, as well as with respect to multifamily alone. Locally, we've developed 685 units across 4 projects in the last 3 years, or completed 685 units in 4 projects over the last 3 years. The first of which is Island Residences, located at the intersection of 394 and 494. 174 units on an island within the Carlson Towers complex. This was recently awarded the Multifamily Development of the Year by the Minnesota chapter of NAIOP. The second project, not far from here as well, is Arcata, located at 394 in Xenia, 165 units that was completed in early 2015. Both of these projects, I should mention, are stabilized and fully leased. The third project, also fully leased, was developed near Target Field in the Interchange Transportation Hub in the North Loop, 182 units. This project's referred to as Junction Flats, and this was completed shortly before the Minnesota Twins hosted the All-Star Game at Target Field. And our most recent completion, situated at the northwest corner of Lake Calhoun, near where Lake Street and Excelsior Boulevard converge, is Foundry. This is a 164-unit project. We welcomed our first residents just over a couple of weeks ago, and looking forward to bringing that property to the same level of stabilization as the others. Moving on to the proposed use, like the 4 projects I just characterized, this project will also have unique design and architecture from previous projects that we've developed, and will also have the same luxury finishes in the residences, the common areas, and the amenities. The difference, however, the 4 projects I just showcased were all market rate apartments, and this project is going to support renters ages 55 and older. This housing option allows this rental segment to benefit from a really cohesive community and the socialization aspects of the community, as well as the location, being close to amenities like Jerry's Foods, the library, the senior center, transit, as well as in a community that we feel, doing the research we've done, is going to benefit from this new housing option being introduced to the community, both with respect to residents here who may find this a really suitable lifestyle for themselves and allows them to free up a single-family home, but also for the families that desire to enter Edina, and perhaps we'll find more single-family homes by way of the transition that this project might provide. This type of project is most commonly referred to as senior apartments because it doesn't provide all the levels of care that independent and assisted living projects provide. We've tried to differentiate that by referring to it as active adult. This continuum slide helps characterize where active adult sits within the continuum of housing options that may more broadly be characterized as senior housing. On the left side would be market rate multifamily apartments or single family homes. On the far right side would be nursing care. So the acuity and the care needs rise as you move to the right on this chart. Active adult, we believe, is going to be situated between senior apartments and independent living. And the reasons for that, this slide shows the different services that are being provided at these various housing provisions for seniors throughout the community. With senior apartments, you really just get housing and age restriction. If you go all the way over to nursing care, you get not just housekeeping, meals, and transportation, but socialization, skilled nursing, et cetera. With active adult, we're providing the socialization, but we're also providing for renters who do still like to cook their own meals and who are still able-bodied and active to get meals, transportation, and housekeeping on an a la carte basis, but to also have luxury finishes in a really good location in a part of town that means a lot to them with respect to families and other civic relationships that they have. So moving on to the site, I think I'll begin by describing the process. As the 5 of you are certainly aware, but for the benefit of others either watching or in the room, we were a part of a process that the school board commissioned to sell their bus garage site in preparation for their move to the new facility. We were among 3 developers, I believe, in the last stage of that process, and we were selected by the school board with our proposed use. We entered into a purchase agreement to acquire the property, and since March, we've met with stakeholders, staff, and as Mr. Teague mentioned most recently, the Plan Commission to solicit feedback on our project design and configuration. In doing so, we've learned that there is broad support for the redevelopment of the site and also for the use. And we certainly also understand that the density in our initial plans caused concern, and that was most recently expressed by the Plan Commission. To address this, as you'll see, we slowed down the process. We delayed this meeting that we're having this evening by 2 weeks, which allowed us to incorporate some new design comments. to help provide some context for what Aaron is going to begin sharing in just a moment, I wanted to just show these images of the existing site context. As you see, the view and sound concerns that exist here by way of the parking garage wall that faces the project to the south, which is part of the Grandview Square office building, the gas stations and the uses immediately west of the site, the truck delivery area for Jerry's Foods to the north, and then of course the railway corridor and right-of-way to the east. With that comes some topography and some grade changes, and those present some design challenges that Aaron will address how his team has helped incorporate. We have a retaining wall to the north of the property on the Jerry's Food site, an embankment along the west side of the property that meets with the property to the east in kind of an angular fashion, to the west in an angular fashion, and with that makes it difficult to create good pedestrian continuity and connectivity. And then lastly, we understand how important this site is. We know that this is a catalyst site and that this is important to the Grandview vision. We understand there's been a lot of effort and resources contributed to create the Grandview plan that exists today, as well as the transportation study that was completed last summer. So with that, I'm going to invite Aaron up to talk a little bit more about the site and the design. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Aaron Rosseth. I'm with ESG Architects. I appreciate the time tonight, as always, as we are showing what we consider a very exciting project. Just to stay on the slide for 1 second, in my opinion, and I think that I share this with many other people, this is a pioneering project. It really is. It's the site constraints, the topography, being by a rail line, massive retaining wall, big surface parking lots, and the back end of a parking garage don't make it necessarily easy to fit in contextually, because we don't want that context there anymore necessarily. You have created an amazing vision with Grandview, and the layer of evidence of that is certainly in the strategic planning that you've done, that and the transportation plan, which kind of weaves and connects all these together in a long-term vision. And so beyond the site constraints, one of the things that we felt was important talking with you and staff throughout the process getting to this point tonight is really dedicating our right-of-way, however that gets transacted at the end of the day, with something in perpetuity for your ability to create this transportation plan. But more importantly, I believe that it's really going to create what we call in architecture world a there, a place. And housing belongs here, and your master plan identifies that, and we believe this will help set that in motion for the future Grandview and other adjacent parcels, we hope. We've talked to several of you about just how we approach different projects, and I brought a couple of slides just to demonstrate our early thinking on not only how the architecture can respond to the site and create a vision, but it's really important to my staff and the interior designers and the architects on the project that we really understand what a vocabulary is that is very meaningful. We don't do cookie cutter architecture at all. That's really important to us. As the many projects that Grady showed that we partnered with them in the past, each one of those has their own identity, both interior and exterior. And we think that that's important because when we go into a community, we really want it to be meaningful and set a message for the residents that this is home for them. And so several of these are just the beginning inspiration concept imagery that we've identified is this target market and early examples of people in the single family homes that would be moving into this environment probably have or aspire to with their next chapter of living. One more quick example of that. We believe we have made significant changes, and as Grady said, and we've been working nonstop over the last 2 weeks to try to respond to what both the staff planners or the city staff has talked to us about, as well as the Planning Commission. In site plan, Jesse Simoleski from Damon Fiber is here tonight, and I'm going to quickly go through the plans, but he's certainly here for specific questions on the landscape design. But big picture, this is what we did. In the site plan, we wanted to create sort of the before and after and the options in the future for the northern part of the site as we go up into next to Jerry's. And we have several sectional, more detailed description, it's also in your package, of what those relationships are. As Mr. Teague had noted in the sketch plan review, there's a portion of the property that we were taking artistic license, which we shouldn't do at this point. We have had very good discussions with Jerry, but nothing is concretized with that right now. But we're showing sort of how this vision within the property lines can exist. And then we're also showing as continued efforts are made with Jerry's how those subtleties could be done in an earlier stage or perhaps even now as if we can continue forward. But on the northern part, we're setting a tone for what that visually could be. It could be a beautiful pedestrian pathway, and if the future of the transportation plans don't happen as quickly as you would want them to, or don't happen at all, we want to create a place that's very special and meaningful to that. So from the northern portion of the units facing that, we certainly want it graphically beautiful. And then in the future, if it does become a pathway, then we would want to work closely with you how we can maintain sort of a nice look to it, but also create that transportation. The edges of the building, you can see on the southwest corner how one of the very important things that came out of sketch plan and discussions with staff is that we needed to pull back a significant portion of the building. And so originally, we did go into sketch plan with a range of 180 to 190, and Trammell has been working hard to understand how much they can pull back, and right now we're at the 165, so it's in that range of 15 to 25 units reduction. Part of that did allow us some breathing room. And so in that corner, we felt it was really important to pull back the building as far as we can and create what we call an auto court or kind of a public plaza. Jesse has some great examples of inspiration images of what types of features we could incorporate into that, including park benches and landscape buffers. As well, we also did that in the center section of here. We pulled the building back. We reduced a row of parking in this area, pulled back the building significantly, so we would create another relief point in the building. And we also did that on the east side, along Brookside here, within the building and the architecture. One of the other comments, and I'll illustrate this better in the perspective drawings, but just to make a quick note of it, was the horizontal and vertical breaking up of the facades. And you can see a lot of the undulations in the plan, but again, I'll show you that in the perspectives. This is just a close-up without the filter over the top of the landscape area. Damon Farber has been looking closely at all the relationships we have to the topography, including the pathway that I talked about to the north, and then the walk-up areas that we still can achieve within our property line with the sidewalk connecting up into Jerry's, and similarly on Brookside. Here's some of the vision images of what we consider that relationship to public and private realm. An area like this, and the entry court is going to be partially retained wall, but we think it could be treated as a really cool pocket park as you're meandering the public sidewalks, as well as we really like the idea of the boulevard trees kind of creating different areas that break up the long nature of just connective sidewalks, where we could have respite areas like in that indentation along Eden, where there's park benches and things of that sort. On the second level, they're also looking at ways to really activate and in a three-dimensional way, things that we can do in that court area. And then if you have specific questions on native plants, Jesse's here for that as well. We also have John Libby from Kimley Horn, and one of the things that I kept thinking about during the sanitary and sewer discussion was you're making incredible efforts to make sure that your infrastructure stays in place and maintains the quality that you have with your increasing demand for people to really want to live in your community. The other is that each one of these developments has to do on-site stormwater treatment, and this bus garage is the antithesis of that. We literally are, right now it's almost 100% impervious surface. All of the water is running straight to the street. And so there's no stormwater collection on the street. And so beyond the sack and whack, your requirements are also to maintain your site and take care of your role in sort of the bigger picture of the sanitary and stormwater. So just the quick comments on that. Some of the strategies that we're looking at are a combination of green roofs, rain gardens, and underground retention and storage. Quickly through the plans, I think I'm going to flip through these and come back to them if you'd like me to. These are before and after pictures. So this is what was submitted on 4/25, and one of the criticisms of a couple of the architects from the sketch plan review was just the size and the bulk of this area. And one of their suggestions was to do whatever we can to kind of pull that back and create more of a podium expression. And so I'll go back and forth between these pictures. They encouraged us to literally put our pencils down and rethink the plan, and we think we have. These are the exact same perspectives in the computer model, and you can see how we were really emphasizing the vertical component of this and not breaking down the mass as we turned this corner and went up towards Jerry's. All of this is set back significantly. We created this auto court public plaza area and then established what I think is a really strong sort of base, middle, top to a building. We changed the materials a little bit. We're suggesting a copper top to these key corners of the building, and then all brick and brick at the base and a beautiful stone entry that is part of that podium expression. And then also as you move up towards the grade, towards the top, that we're also continuing to break the horizontal nature of the project. So these aren't big, massive, bulky sides. They're broken up in a very traditional three-part base, middle, top, and then horizontally expressing the bays and the individual units by projecting out different elements. So this is a very subtle thing that we can talk about in detail. It probably makes more sense in the section diagrams that we have, but these are just quick illustrations of if we continued to partner with Jerry and found ways to make street connections, and this is a reaction to what we had submitted in sketch plan review, and the city really encouraged us until we have a binding agreement to say what we can do within our property lines. So these are subtle differences. So this is the, again, the previous submittal on 4/25, and this is the west elevation. And this is the new elevation, same perspective. The garage and the office are actually in front of this. The building disappeared when we rendered this, so I apologize for that. We're not trying to be deceiving of this at all. But it does illustrate sort of different height parameters in the area that do exist. And this is within the 6-story, which is suggested for this area anyway. So this illustrates, again, these copper bookend ends with brick on the end and then projecting bays with metal panel and stucco and then a brick base. And then this is the previous submitted on 4/25 again. And this is what we're suggesting now, same perspective. So look on the left-hand side, how sort of the whole massing and blocking of that kind of disappears by eliminating that whole section of the building, opening up an auto court area, establishing a really strong base, middle, top, accentuating that along these grade areas to Brookside, and establishing a very strong podium, which was suggested by many of the planning commissioners. Here's a couple of different graphics then of what the area along Brookside and the connection up to Jerry's could look like. Again, as we wrap the building, the garage is buried within the building and surrounded with housing. We want to activate every part of the building as much as possible and relate what happens on these different programmed areas, to relate those to the street as much as we can with these front porches. But within the road itself, here's the before, and then here's the after. And again, creating that really strong podium base top, the copper ends, and then what that meandering pathway could be. And this is very subtle, and hopefully you can see this on your monitors, but the difference in grade, if we can work out that 3-foot property line with Jerry's versus if we can't, and again, this section will illustrate that. All of these options allow for whatever happens in the future to happen. In all of the planning that you've done with your transportation plan and master plan for Grandview, this would allow it again. And then the last illustration, which coincides with this graphic, which is in your plan, is how that upper level could eventually connect to the midpoint of that garage. So just to point out a couple of the height comparisons, and again,
Okay.
Yep.
Aaron, if you would, the connection to the garage, the connection, is that a connection to the existing parking structure
correct.
that's behind Jerry's?
Yeah, sorry, Councilmember Brindle, I'll explain this a little bit better. I flew through it really quick. So currently, here's Jerry's, if you see this on your screen. Right now, if the future planning occurs, you'll cut off a portion of the ramp that couldn't be accessed anymore without a connection point on the back side of this, and that's the midpoint of the garage. So the suggestion in the transportation plan is to open this up and allow for a connection to happen there. And the bottom illustration shows what we're trying to depict graphically, where if you maintain that second level roadway or pathway into here, you would eventually have to create a structure to connect to that midpoint.
And you could still use that area below that. I'd forgotten that that was in the transportation study. So you could still use that area that's below that drive aisle that would take you to that middle section of the ramp?
Right now, we're suggesting that that's just a pathway, so it would be dirt right now. For us, it would be landscaped, and in the future, Trammell is saying that so we don't not allow you to complete your vision, that they're gonna give that land to you or work a way that an easement exists, that in the future, if you needed or wanted to do this, you would be able to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm almost done. I have a few more illustrations just of height in the area, and I don't think that that's really become the issue. 6 stories is part of the suggested height for this area, and we're following that. But just to point out a couple of the elevations, we do have that incredible grade change, which we're trying to use to as much of the advantage of the project as possible by tucking the garage into it and then activating the uses that surround it as much as we can. And just a visual graphic of it from an aerial point of view. And you can see what we believe are very significant changes in terms of eroding the edge of this building, pushing it back significantly, reestablishing the podium in a very strong way, breaking up and not emphasizing the verticality as much as the more traditional approach of base, middle, top, and then pulling back some of the building massing here, and then also in this area, eliminating the garage stalls and pulling that back from the sidewalk as well. So as you have in your package, we can go through these in detail, but I think instead maybe we should open up for questions and see where you'd like the dialogue to go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roseth.
Thank you.
Member Brindle, I'll let you lead off.
All right. Couple things. Would you please put up the image of the building that was okay.
Is that one okay?
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not supposed to talk about design, but I'm going to talk about design because it's very different from the first one. And the difference that hits me first is that the first one was warm colors, and this is more cool colors. Just those cool colors seem to not make it look so massive. Is that your objective?
Our objective was certainly focused on material and color and composition. We really worked hard on the massing and pulled back in many different ways. The colors are sometimes, unfortunately, I was talking to Lucas, one of the designers on the project, about it. How we illustrate it sometimes makes it more realistic, or it can also go in the cartoon way sometimes.
Sure.
And so we need to study those more, and even the copper isn't rendering very well in these perspectives as it would in a very ephemeral way, which is the beauty of copper. But so we're going to continue to work on that portion. The cool colors did come out of discussions of that it felt a little bit better.
Okay.
And the darker windows in the kind of the way that this is illustrated felt a little heavier to her, with the black top and the heavy cornice line on top of that versus the kind of a little more understated cornice line, but bringing more of a beautiful material like copper to kind of establish that what looks like a penthouse level.
Okay. It almost looks like a plinth sort of design to me, except over on the right it doesn't look as much like a plinth as it looks on the left. Is it a plinth?
That was a very strong statement that came from a couple of the architects from Sketch Plan, that their suggestion, if we understood them correctly, was to create as much of a podium or plinth as possible to kind of establish more of a human scale to the ground, the sidewalk. And then the middle portion and then the top, this line right here is the same line on this end of the building, and we interrupted that with more of the lobby and entry sequence with, this is stone, and then on both sides it's brick. And like I had said earlier, the goal was that we could bookend it with this and then really create a beautiful entry point with this auto court drop off and in park-like amenities on both this end and the center section that kind of interrupts those bookends.
All right. In some of the other examples, where's my note? Here it is. In some of the other examples of buildings that you showed, there is one that has this it's the Downers Grove building.
Yep.
In Illinois, where the uppermost level is set back.
Oh, sorry.
And that kind of appeals to me, if that's possible to do here, that one.
It's a very, excuse me, it's a very similar thought progression that we had also. I think that was the strongest reaction we felt from the planning commissioners, was that corner just seemed too big and too bold of a statement. And so by literally eliminating square feet of the building and pushing that back, that's what we felt we were responding to. But Councilmember Brenda, are you maybe suggesting that this first level podium, maybe that projects out towards that edge? And
No,
so,
I'm talking about the top level.
top level,
Yeah.
got it. That's something to look at. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here. All right, put my glasses on. Thank you for listening, taking the time to really be thoughtful about this. You've been through this with us before. And what resulted at the Onyx is really a lovely building. And hearing about people moving in there and really excited about it. So the back and forth that goes on really does help us to get to a point where what we end up with is something you're proud of, and it's something we're very proud of as well. And it fits. Now, this is a small piece of property, so I fully understand that you are constricted by the size of the property, not just the grade, but the size of the property, to put something in here
Right.
that is going to make a statement, that is going to be desirable, is going to make people want to move there. And therefore, you're going to need every square inch of that property that you can use and more. So I stand, it gives me pause a little bit to see the number of variances. So when I look at the attention given on the north to make that a public conveyance, not just for the people who live in this building, but for people passing through from the front of Jerry's to back to what the new development will become at Grandview, that's a very important asset to us. The sidewalks around the rest of the building are also very important, but I think that conveyance is one of the best things that will, apart from a beautiful place to live, but one of the best things that would come out of this project is that connectedness through there. Is there a connection to Jerry's parking lot from there? Are there steps up to the parking lot?
The goal would be that we don't have to have steps, that those sidewalks could connect up into.
So that's that lift you were showing?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So that's something you're working out with Jerry's?
We are.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I look at the 115 units an acre, and
I think they're down to 101, aren't you?
Is it 101?
Correct.
Okay. It's a lot, but as I said, it's a small piece of property, and we'd love to have it developed in something that is going to be desirable. But I guess, and then stormwater. So you're trapping it underneath? What are you doing?
John Libby should probably talk
pipes.
about this, but the strategy at my level at 10,000 feet is that we're looking at a combination of underground tanks and storage and rate flow, and then some green roof, and then also we're looking at an option, an option of rain gardens that could be part of actually the landscape plan.
Okay.
Where you could connect small rain gardens off of front entry stoops and things like that.
Sure.
Did I say that okay, Mr. Libby? Okay.
Okay, so the underground cistern, if you will, are you able to then filter that water and use it for irrigation? Is that the idea?
Mr. Libby?
Good afternoon, good evening, this is John Libby with Kimley Horn. To respond to your question, the water would be taken from the roof leaders and stored underground. We expect that could be infiltrated into the ground because we do have sandy soils.
Yeah.
But there is also an option to trap that and reuse it for irrigation.
Okay, great. Yeah, those are my comments, so I'll let somebody else speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, let me point out, no matter what goes in place of these school buses garages, it will be an improvement.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, that's a low bar for improvement. This, and as Member Brindle pointed out, this is a relatively small piece of property, and we recognize the challenges there. The initial plans, when I reviewed them, and I think they're more or less what we were shown in the package on Friday, really builds out sort of edge to edge of the whole property in ways that I found very disagreeable, as I mentioned to you before, and I think you have taken steps to push it in the right direction. You've stepped back that one edge. It's not quite as massive as it was. But in my judgment, we're still not there. I still feel like there's too much mass, and I'm concerned about that. So, and part of that, yes, it is suggested as a 6-story location under the comp plan, but it's currently zoned for 4 stories. For me, there's a little give to get thing that's needed here. If you want to go higher, I feel like I'd like to see more green space or more stuff that sort of engages the street, which gets me back to that word that I've used before, and as I mentioned to you before when we met, I'd really like to see this property be part of what catalyzes development in the whole area surrounding it. I'd very much like to have it be something that engages the street, and I realize with these elevations and the rail track and all these other pieces, it's a very difficult challenge, and I'm not belittling that by any means, but I still feel, particularly on a couple of the edges, that it has a little bit of this fortress thing going on that I'm a bit uncomfortable with. I'd very much like to have it be more engaged with the street and less, especially from a couple of angles, quite massive still. So I don't have specific suggestions on that. You guys have done a nice job. One of the things that I saw tonight that I hadn't seen before, along that northern edge where you've proposed a path, I really kind of liked that. And then you showed the alternative where there could instead be a roadway connection that connects up to the second level of the parking ramp. I think, and I don't know if we as a council need to decide that, if staff needs to just make a recommendation, or the Transportation Commission. We need to figure that out. Which should it be in terms of what the access need is? I don't think, it's not on that level that Jerry's needs to get its trucks back there, right? That's on the lower level. So, yeah, interesting creative concept. I'm not sure which is right. In some ways, I like it better with the path and the walkway, and it creates a little more pedestrian friendliness on that side. So, but you need some guidance from us on that. I'm afraid I'm not prepared to give it to you tonight.
Yeah,
so
we do, Councilmember Stewart. If this wasn't part of your plan, we wouldn't be this far away from the property line.
Right. So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have a good response tonight. Tonight's the first I've thought about it, and I think I need more inputs to understand that.
Okay.
Those are, I guess, my main comments. Again, this idea of having it really engage the area surrounding it is, I just feel that that's really important. And I feel like we're heading in the right direction. I just don't feel like we're there yet. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your work. I've always enjoyed your work. You do nice work. We appreciate working with you. A couple of questions, and maybe if you can put up the cover sheet graphic that kind of has the the superimposed building in the aerial shot? Yeah. So on the west side, at one point, there was some discussion about retail or other shops. Was that still in there, or is it all residential now?
We're still looking at that corner as being a possibility for retail, and there's a salon component to the program for this, and one of the concepts is that could become third party, where there's literally access on that corner.
So access down at the corner of Eden, but how about as that goes up the hill there? Are you talking about any access?
I was saying actually on the top of the hill towards Jerry's.
Okay.
And of course, as we've met with Jerry's, there's a very popular beauty salon here. But it's just one of the program elements of this is there's typically one integrated as well. And the concept would be if the council and others felt that that would be a viable option, that maybe that could be a retail spot as well.
So I went back, I've spent a good portion of my life studying this area. And I went back, and for better or worse, and I went back and looked at the framework and kind of to get a feel of that. And there was an interesting couple of phrases in the framework that talked about this site. One of the phrases was a pivot point. It talks about it could be a major pivot point for how a number of land use decisions may play out, and then also called it a land use connector along Eden Avenue. And as you look at this picture, you really see how it's a centerpiece in many ways. I mean, the public works site is as well, but this is to the south. If you think about coming up from the senior center, there's a pathway across Eden and then up the hill to Jerry's, and then ultimately in the framework we're talking about at the office tower, taking a right and maybe taking a road that would go across the railroad tracks, kind of a pedestrian-friendly road. So we're trying to create these connections and these pathways. Similarly to the west, it's, there's redevelopment just waiting to happen to the west, and this will inform how people are pulled along Eden Avenue or not. And then if we have talked about the east side, on the other side of the railroad tracks, being more of the stay at destination type of uses. But if you're gonna get to those, and if you're gonna walk to those, the west side provides that convenience retail, whether it's walking or driving, the kind of place that you would come in, get what you need, and then leave. And what I feel like Councilmember Stewart used the word fortress. It doesn't feel like it's connecting to the surrounding. It feels like it's looking inward. It feels like it has its walls up to the outside and it's looking inward. And I don't see it inviting people to go up the hill toward Jerry's. I don't see it inviting people along Eden toward what ultimately will happen on the other side of the railroad tracks. And I get it as it exists right now. If you were building for if we were assuming everything around it would stay the same, in some ways I understand. You got a railroad track that you got to deal with. You got a gas station on another side, and there is this almost feeling to pull up the shutters and look inward and have a courtyard in the middle that then is where all the energy is focused. But we're hoping for it to be a catalyst to help those other places turn over. And I don't see, what I'm most bothered with is I don't see it it's not connecting. It seems like it's a barrier that's looking inward. And it might be partly the uses, it might be partly the design, but I think if there were some street level uses that were inviting people to it, that could help some of it. I do think you've made some nice design changes in the bulk so that it doesn't look as imposing as it did, but it still feels like it's looking inward. So my biggest beef with it is it feels too, you know, I initially was concerned about the density, and I still am concerned about the density, and I have to think about the width of the roadway and how that really would fit in. But I think the density might work if it felt like it was connecting with the rest instead of being a fortress, to use Councilmember Stewart's. So there, I mean, that's a very high level, and I appreciate, as everyone else has said, that it's a difficult site. But that's my reaction. Thank you.
That was really astute. The way you described that, I think maybe probably describes the way a lot of people have felt and maybe couldn't describe it in that way. But I think there's something there about, particularly on that west side. So I'll leave it at that. So when I look at sketch plan review, I ask, you know, is this an appropriate use? I think yes. Does it follow our rules or guidelines? And the staff report would suggest that it, you know, we need all kinds of variances. And I think a few of us have mentioned that as well. I think Councilmember Stewart said something about it's zoned for 4 stories. And I talked to Carrie earlier today because I'm really struggling with this aspect of this project. We've got a bus barn site that really is an industrial site. So technically, yeah, I mean, if we went by what it's zoned for, we should just throw this out, right? So there's a paradigm shift that has to happen here.
And I don't think any of us want to end up with self-storage on this site.
I don't
yes.
think so. So, but this is what I'm struggling with, is that now staff did what they're supposed to do, right? They look at our rules as they exist. They try and look at what, you know, if it's not going to be planned industrial district, which it is, then you look at something which is planned commercial district, which it could be. But the reality is, we're going to create our own zoning here. It's called PUD. So to say that we need a bunch of variances, I'm not sure is correct. I think what we need to do is find the right solution for this site. And if it's a catalytic site, we have to ask ourselves, what is it we're trying to achieve? And I think a lot of the comments that I heard tonight are right on the mark. It's like in the vein of, here's what I'm not comfortable with, here's what I'm comfortable with, but what could this be? What should it be to achieve what we've worked how many years on for the Grandview site? So in that vein, something that I'm about to lose my mind on is this whole transportation plan and what they should do, what they shouldn't do on the north side. And can Jennifer or Carrie, could someone bring up just I just need us once to look at the big picture here before we talk about what happens on this site. And the big picture being, this was like one of the bigger diagrams from the transportation plan. So I watched the entire planning commission meeting, sketch plan review for this project. And I watched it after the fact, or I probably would have ran down here. But the planning commission was struggling. 3 of them literally said, get rid of the street. What are you doing? You know, putting a street on the north side of your building. And what they weren't understanding, they're like, well, there's already access to the Jerry's parking. And even tonight, I don't think we all really understand what's happening there. So in the bigger picture plan, if we're creating an east-west street on the north side of Jerry's, which you can see in this diagram, that in effect takes out one, right now we have a ramp with a split level at that location. Well, you can't have a street that meets all of our ADA requirements and everything and hit 2 different levels, 10-foot difference in that span. So we have to pick a level, which is the upper level of the ramp off of that street, which means the lower level of the ramp has no access. We need to do it from the south. So what's shown in this transportation plan is we create a new intersection at 52nd, which then could become a street on the south side of Jerry's, on the north side of this particular site, which then can turn left. Now, somebody's got to build this, right? Presumably us as the city, build an upper level. It would be at the same elevation, so that south side of Jerry's, coincidentally, is pretty close to the same elevation as the lower level of that ramp. So now all of a sudden, you can have another street system going back to the ramp, which could also create a whole bunch of commuter parking on the backside of Jerry's. In this transportation plan, it was actually anticipated that a parking deck would go down on this site down to Brookside. This particular development, they would rather put housing in than parking, which is their right and was probably a good idea, so that's fine. But the piece that's really important is that north side connection. And I think the Planning Commission just didn't understand that, so, in a way, it looks like we're telling this developer, different things. And I just want to make sure that we're all clear what the transportation plan is showing. Now, if you can somebody bring up so if everyone gets this big picture, there's the image that you were showing, Aaron, where, so I do want to thank you for continuing to try to meet our needs, though you're not really getting a clear picture of what those needs are. So is the image of, where that north, okay, so, right, so here, so you have a scheme where it's coming down to Brookside, which we could certainly do. But the reality is we need that street to stay at that upper level to go back to that ramp. But what's really important is that there are trucks moving. So you want to talk about site challenges here. We talked about the railroad. We've talked about being on the backside of Jerry's. And we have truck traffic that has to serve Jerry's, not at one level, but at two levels, right? So you have trucks coming up Brookside that have to get under that structure. So, those columns are would have to be placed so trucks can continue to move to serve the backside, as well as city vehicles that serve the treatment plant in the bottom level of the ramp. And then at the upper level, those cars and vehicles can move back to the ramp, but also trucks have to serve the back end of Jerry's right here at this corner. I think, so what's been shown so far is great because I think it gives us some flexibility, but I think it's sort of incumbent upon the city to take whatever we're going to do here from very conceptual, almost cartoon-like ideas and determine fairly quickly what we need to do there. Now, what the team here seems to be showing is actually, I kind of like the idea that you're saying, look, we'll do something here until you figure it out. So now I'm going to ask you to go back a few steps, and actually this image shows it. This wasn't in the Planning Commission scheme, and I really appreciate the level of detail you're showing to start thinking about where you're going to put a generator and an electrical equipment in sketch plan. In this case is really important because my question is, do you feel comfortable that if we have to do that upper level element, is this going to be okay here? Is this going to work?
Councilmember Fisher, we do. That's the way that we planned it, where that infrastructure could literally go over that portion of it, and that we have to work that out with Excel, with clearance heights, as you know, and things like that.
Yeah.
But that was the goal.
And then I also noticed that you have the intake and the exhaust from your parking, so you have to relieve your parking. Is that going to be okay if we go over the time?
That we're thinking about it, as you've noted. We have different areas that we can achieve those necessities. And if we have to go on Brookside or on one of the others, we can also look at area wells versus doing side-mounted intake and louvers.
Okay, so now I've just broken all of my rules about the level of detail of questions in that. So I just,
No problem.
but in this case, it just felt like really important, and I wanted to make sure that we all are on the same page about what we have been asking or what we have planned as a city. So one way or another, we have to weigh this based on some level of criteria, and I want to make sure at some point, if they come back and make an application, that our planning commission is on the same page, so we're all giving the same kind of feedback. So I'm going to go back to
Councilmember Fisher, do you mind
Sure.
if I make one statement? Excuse me. I really appreciate you bringing this up because we don't have a clear understanding of where you and the staff and commissioners want to take this. And it's really important. And a lot of the feedback in terms of, we feel like we made significant efforts both to activate the streetscape around the perimeter, but also pull the building back in critical areas. One of the areas, if we didn't have this, and we're not suggesting at all that we want to do what you think is the right thing to do for the long-term vision, but we would pull the building back and it would open up more green space along Eden, even more than we have, to kind of create even more of a pocket park. We would probably be within 15 feet of the property line on the north side. So it's a very significant, I think, contribution from Trammell Crow to say, this is a big give back to the city, and I don't think we haven't felt like there's been a reciprocal understanding of that in terms of the overall goals of the design and the footprint.
And thank you for saying that. That's part of my frustration is that it shouldn't be lost on us that this is a small site that's got a lot of difficulties that could catalyze a Grandview area, and to take a 35-foot swath out of that site is one thing, and it's a whole nother thing if we're kind of beating them up for it at the same time. And I would suggest that, and I'm not saying, there are plenty of areas that this needs to be improved, but I would suggest that we figure it out for one thing, and then somehow account for this when we're looking at, and that's why I say we have to be a little careful when we're saying it's this zoning and it's got to apply these setbacks or whatever, because if we simply move the building back on the site, I think we could meet a lot of those requirements. So I think this is going to become, it's going to become a little bit more of a discussion than a straight numbers thing. So anyway, enough on that piece. My comment on there, you commented on, whoops, let me get back here. So for me, density, in that vein, I don't think of it in terms of numbers because we can't feel a number. We can't experience a number. I share the concern that, if it feels too heavy, too much on the site, that's something we experience. And I think that's a continuing conversation we have to have. I think this latest scheme is a huge improvement, personally, from what I saw from the Planning Commission presentation. So you're heading in the right direction, and I think we've heard that there's still some work that needs to be done. I would argue that playing with the height might help. I'm not as concerned about height in this location, and I'm not sure we really have a height requirement here. I guess I'd have to look at that more. But again, I think the experience at the street level where people are walking by and driving by this building, I think Council Member Staunton really hit it on that. If you had some retail or some commercial on that west side that would help draw people up the sidewalk, it might mean, needing to reconfigure where some units are or whatever. And maybe there's another way to do it, but that would be something. Let's see, I asked you about the garage. Let's see, sustainability. I would just comment that, you talk about some things you're doing for sustainability, energy efficient appliances, low flow fixtures, low VOC paints, and building wide recycling. Now it's not exactly like, knocking it out of the park, and I get it, this is early concepts, but what I would encourage you is I think this project can be catalytic in other ways. And when I look at those things, which are pretty easy to do in any project, I just want you to know that we've got our high school students showing up here asking us to commit to energy neutral by 2040. And we're not going to get there by having low energy appliances, right? It's going to be bigger, sustainable thinking. And this is a really talented team sitting here, and I would just ask you, when you really get into the design, if you choose to do that really think about that aspect as well and how we can be leaders. The design itself, like I said, I think it's it's improving as it goes, and I'm confident it'll continue to get better. And I think my biggest comment here is that the success of this is going to depend on a collaboration with really, I think, three parties. It's the Jerry's group, it's the city, and it's the developer of this site. And we can't force Jerry's to do anything, but I think they're going to be really a key part of this. I don't know, on that, and I'll just use the example back to that street on the north side of this. You're showing properly that you're going to do it on your property line, but really, to make that really work, I think we're going to need a street that, and we're going to need Jerry's to want to agree that this could actually work, that a street goes through and it's got green and sidewalks on both sides. It really feels like something wonderful. There's not another parallel path with trucks going back to a loading dock, that the trucks would come down the middle, down the street just like a car would, and they would turn in, we'd have to create some avenue for them to get into their loading area. So we have a real intersection, because someday there's going to be another project across the street to the west, which could have, retail and the stuff you're talking about. And that has to feel like a street, not a path to a back parking lot with a loading dock entrance. So I don't even know how we pull all that together, but it has to happen in collaboration. And, if it does, this could be really an incredible project. So, I'm sorry, that was really a long-winded list of questions.
It made me think of the concept aerial view that you had with various heights of the buildings in the neighborhood. So for me, from the get-go, looking at whether or not the building that you're proposing is proportional or in scale with the neighborhood, I think it actually looks good. It looks like it fits. And I'll get to some of these other issues in a minute, but in terms of its height, I'm pretty comfortable with that. We get elevation changes as you march north. Jerry's office building is actually taller than this building, but there's a elevation differential. It's only 5 feet higher than the building across the street. So from a scale or a proportional to the neighborhood concept, which is important, I think to me it passes that test quite easily. Again, as Member Fisher said, is it an appropriate use for the site? I think absolutely. The use of the PUD to me is okay too, and I think that's an interesting issue about the elimination of the variances. In terms of the improvements that you made from the Planning Commission to the Council, I think they're dramatic. I think the site plan improvements are dramatic. I think the building improvements are dramatic. That southwest view off of Eden as you look northeast, where you've created that podium height, I think that's very impressive as you go along. If you were on your new rendering, in fact, you might want to put it up there. As you move along to the east, one of the things I was worried about was, would you be walking by too much building and feel like you had 6 stories kind of hanging over you as you were walking, if you were going to go over to the hilltop, for example, and have lunch. And if you find those renderings of your streetscape, we could just kind of walk around the building. But they're not up on the screen here. They may be on your screen, but they're not on mine. There we go. So there's a good illustration of the concept from Eden Avenue. And as you walk east, I think you've done a great job of extending that podium concept all the way to the east edge of the building, so that people that are walking along in front of it on Eden Avenue are going to feel really comfortable. With respect to the colors, it might be a little bit early on that, but the overall design shape, I think it's good. I'm intrigued by Member Brindle's comment about maybe pulling that top floor back just a touch. It might help with the massing issue. The density, I know that's been controversial. I know our staff has some pretty strong feelings about it, but existing density is 75 units per acre, and we're thinking about going to 101. I think the site can handle it. The elimination of the single plane on the sides of the building, I think is really critical. You have moved the building in and out in a way where it creates architectural interest, I think, for anybody that's driving by, walking by, and to get rid of that single plane is very, very important, I think. As I mentioned, the use of the podium height, that was an excellent improvement. What else would I have on my list here? Stormwater management, I think you're on the right trail there, right track. I like the way you've tried to adjust. Early on we talked about the transportation plan that was in place, and you hadn't been told about it really when you had your first drawings, as I recall. But you've tried to do something with that north side that gives us a chance to have some green space in there for now. I appreciate it. I think everybody here does. That may eventually become that connector to the west to 52nd Street and then become the way of getting back into the ramp, as Member Fisher elaborated on to an extensive degree. The materials, I like the copper idea on the top. I think borrowing some of the features of City Hall, moving them across the road, especially with copper on the top, and maybe it's you can look at the Lannon stone issue too, for the base instead of some manufactured stone, and the use of those materials like brick, I think is a good one. I think I expected to see something that was going to be really massive and foreboding, and it's not to me. And I don't have the same sense of it. I know why it's oriented the way it is. I mean, you want people to be able to live in a little bit of a cocoon, and I don't feel it's as off-putting to the general public, for me at least, when you walk, as we showed on that one elevation where you're walking west to east or east to west on Eden. Very pleasant. I think going up Arcadia, very pleasant. And then I think the one issue that people have raised, a couple of folks, has been the distance from Eden up to I'll call it the Jerry's grocery store. Concerned about there's something that draws people up there. Well, I'll tell you what, having a shortcut to Jerry's is something that'll draw you up there in a hurry, regardless to me whether you're walking by an apartment building or something else, as long as it doesn't feel like it's hanging over the sidewalk. And it has that bit of a setback feel. It's not a very great distance to traverse there from Eden Avenue up to the grocery store. So I guess I'm not as concerned about that as some of the other folks. I think there'll be enough activity on that street just from all the people that'll be walking back and forth that you wouldn't have to think about putting retail in there for me. But for some of the others, I think they think that it creates more vitality if you figure out something that can be in there on a mixed-use basis with the apartment building itself. I like the concept of the 55 plus. I think you know what you're doing in that area at Trammell Crow, and I think this is a good site for something like that. So those are my comments. That lead to anybody else to make any supplemental comments?
I do have one thing.
Fisher?
And this is something I wanted to say before when the diagram was up. So Jennifer, can I ask you one more time to put that transportation diagram up?
I found one more issue I want to talk about ways they're doing that. And a couple people have made this observation. But, the site itself is probably 50–60% enclosed by Jerry's property. So it's really critical that you figure out how to work with him, with Shattuck and that whole Jerry's organization. And the best access to your place is from the west as well, across his property. So we've really got to pay attention to that, and you've got to have some kind of cooperation there to make this whole thing work. Member Fisher.
So what I wanted to, and I just want to reiterate again, the role, that staff plays in this is they have to look at what we're dealing with today and respond to that. And this is such a unique situation because, even our comprehensive plan, when that was done, we hadn't had one meeting on the Grandview future, right? So a lot of the planning that's happened here even doesn't fit our own comprehensive plan necessarily. So we're in this unique position. But one thing I wanted to point out, we're all trying to deal with our own way of how do we think about the density, which is a big number, right, compared to what we've dealt with and on this site. And one thing I think that I would say we need to look at, and how I'm trying to weigh it, because it is a lot, is that when you look at this transportation plan, so when I think of higher density sites, I want to look, what's their proximity to freeway interchanges, for instance. So density is just a matter of like, you know, it's a number of units, which means a number of people, which means cars or you know, coming and going. So if I'm going to have a higher density site, I want to make sure that they're not all running through single family neighborhoods, right? Or they're, I think about several years ago when we approved the orthopedic clinic up on 65th or whatever, I was comfortable with a higher density because there's an interchange right there. And I look at this one and I think, I would weigh, you know, a little higher density because of its proximity to the freeway interchanges. But more importantly, if we think to the future here, we have in this transportation plan where we ended up settling for the major transit hub is literally right at this site. In fact, this site in that plan was shown to connect across, see that little white line that crosses the tracks? That's literally just a cartoonish illustration of if you were to ever have a rail transit in Edina, in Grandview, it's right there. So it's literally connected to this site. Now, how it will end up, I don't know, but you know, the plan says that, and if the rail never happens, the bus transit is still happening there. So if there were ever a site in our city that's going to have pretty intense transit opportunities, it's right here, which I think we just have to, when this rolls along, we have to factor all of that into these, you know, ultimate density numbers that we come to grips with. And that's, I just forgot to say that earlier.
Yeah,
thanks.
that's a good observation. Thank you. Anyone else?
No, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
The only other thing, I just had
Member
one
Staunton.
other thing to Councilmember Fisher's comment and to the mayor's comment about the surrounding property. You know, per my earlier comments, I do think to the west and to the north especially, it's going to be critical to be able to, you know, there's going to be development to the west, and so we want this to end up being the other side of the street, and we need to imagine what that's like. To this fortress notion, I agree with Councilmember Fisher that I'm not as frightened about additional height here if it can break up that massiveness. You know, that if you had to go taller in order to step things back and create a little more, or create a little more feeling that it's welcoming or it's inviting. I just would say that I understand why you did the 6 stories. That's what the comp plan says, but we're at the bottom of the hill. I wouldn't want to see it, you know, as it is, the mass it is now, going up more stories, but if going up a little bit would help break up that mass, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. So that's all I have.
I'd say the same.
Yep, I would too.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back.
Okay, we can handle this. We've got a resolution 2017-50. Donation to the city of Edina. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the resolution accepting donations to the city. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. This reporting period, Park and Rec Department, Braemar Arena, Carol Hay, thank you. Donation for Slapshot. Our former colleague Ann Swenson would be pleased to see this since she worked on Slapshot, the statue out there. Might want to fix that, Ms. Tim. It says Slapshot statute, not statue. The old Slapshot statute. Oh, yeah. Remember that one, Bob, from law school?
I was in first year torts.
Where the guy goes down the boards and hits everybody in the face with his stick.
Edina Park and Rec, Edina Senior Center, nice gift from the Edina Community Foundation. And then Park and Rec Department, Randy Jones, tree donation for Utley Park. Thank you very much. All right. Correspondence and petitions. Anything other than what was on the dais this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you. Just in time for the aviation noise update.
Oh, excellent. All right, aviation noise update. We have a noise oversight committee meeting tomorrow. And I've gotten a couple of emails recently inquiring about the number of airplanes going by and also noise. And it's warm outside, people are outside more, and their windows may be open, so I think people are going to notice airplane noise. And the neighborhood that I think is, we have many neighborhoods that are affected. One that is particularly affected, and the homes are close together, is Morningside. It's particularly approaches where airlines are heading toward, they're likely heading toward touching down maybe at 30L or 30R at the airport, and they right over the Lake Harriet band shell, leading right over Morningside and getting lower all the time. So I think we are all being very patient as much as we're frustrated, but the old MD-80s and MD-90s will go away someday. But they do have a definite lifetime, and that's one thing that that I don't have. I haven't got my fingers on the list of aircraft and their ages and when they're likely to be retired. But that's a good list for us to have, because it'll give us a perspective of when those really loud ones, the 80s and 90s, will go away. But we have a meeting tomorrow, and looking forward to it. We meet every other month, so I'll have a report for you next time.
Thank you. Manager Neal, anything supplemental?
You know, just one thing to supplement, and that is that we are going to make a staffing change on the staff end of about who is monitoring the MAC and the airport noise. And Mark Nolan is going to take that on as an assignment. We've had good success with Mark in terms of kind of working with other planning staff, and we think that'll be a good assignment for him. Okay. So you might be running into him more in that field here very soon.
Good to know.
All right, good. Manager, let's see, we'll go to not manager's comments yet, but council comments. Member Fisher, anything this evening?
Yeah, I don't really have anything special tonight.
Member Staunton?
Just one thing. There's a few things that happened in the last week, but I want to just touch on one. I went on Saturday to the 3rd annual Country Club Historic District walking tour. The mayor was able to join me eventually too, and I just wanted to, this is the 3rd year now that I've realized right about either when it's happening, because I wasn't there the 2nd year, or when I'm there, that I haven't done enough to promote this event. And it struck me that this is a group of folks who are in the neighborhood who organize this thing every year, and it feels like we could collaborate better with our Heritage Preservation Commission on this. And so I don't know what the right way, if the staff liaison can help with that, or if somebody can get word to the Heritage Preservation Commission about how, I mean, this is the other half of the part of heritage preservation where we just say no. You know, you want to also pair it with all of the benefits that come from creating a district that has a unique and a special character, and that's what we're trying to preserve. And these folks do a great job of promoting that, and I think we ought to help them promote it next year. And it just so happens that every year they get absolutely fabulous weather on this Mother's Day weekend. So would just encourage us to remember sooner than the day of next year to help figure out ways to promote it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Brindle.
Thank you. I just have a couple of things. Been getting a number of calls and comments about Tobacco 21, and I'm trying to recall when it might have been a passion project of the 10th grade at the high school. And a young man was working on healthy lifestyles, healthy eating, and he wanted to work with the city on that, so I referred him to the Community Health Commission. And I received a call today about Tobacco 21, and it was less about tobacco and more about, well, if you're going to do that, and health is the reason you're going to do it, then sugar should be something that we take a look at, and again, combating obesity. So I also suggested that to that individual that they talk to the Community Health Commission, but it may be something through education, through just making it obvious that Edina is a community that prioritizes a healthy lifestyle. And so while tobacco is one aspect of that, certainly diet is another, and possibly we can come up with maybe even just an education program to start to get the word out. And then on a sad note, Blade, canine partner of Officer Jason Bear, passed away yesterday. Unexpectedly, though Blade had some known health problems, but of late he was not doing badly. So it was just kind of a surprise that yesterday was the day. Jason's in Washington, D.C. for the national recognition of fallen officers, and so he'll be coming back to handle that. So it just makes it all that more important that we get the Canine Memorial Site situated at the front of City Hall. And I think we probably owe you something in order to get that on our agenda, don't we?
I need to have something to put in front of the council.
Yes, you do. Okay, all right, so it's back in front of me again. All right, I'll take care of that. I'll call the powers that be. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you. Just going back through the calendar here, attended the retirement party for Rick Dressen. Just another note of thanks to Dr. Dressen and to Bruce Locklear, who's also retiring at the end of this academic year, for their wonderful service to our school district and our community. Fortunately, I checked with both. They're both planning to continue living in Edina, so that's a good thing. I suggested to Rick that he get out there with his key to the city and see what he can unlock. But on Thursday, May 4th, I attended a event sponsored by the Watershed District, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, called the Minnesota Water Story. And it was held at St. Mary's Greek Orthodox Church in Minneapolis, in part because they've done some very innovative things there with respect to water catchment, and they're in a challenging site, and they've done just some great work, very innovative stuff. Most of it done about a decade ago. So it's good to see how those things have weathered over the 10 years and see the kind of success they've had in doing that. Sunday, May 7th, a couple of us attended the Days of Remembrance held here at City Hall, sponsored by our Human Rights Commission, our Human Rights and Relations Commission. Just a fantastic program. That's an annual event, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone who has the least bit of interest. That'll roll around again next May, I'm sure. We had on Monday, May 8th, many of us attended a community kickoff for the comprehensive plan work. I would encourage any citizens, anybody who's tuned in here that has an interest in our comprehensive plan, keep an eye out for additional programs. I think there's a lot of outreach to try to solicit input from people on the kinds of things they'd like to see in our comprehensive plan. So your input is very welcome and now is timely too. So On Tuesday, May 9th, in the afternoon, I attended a citizenship ceremony at Southview Middle School. It is just a beautiful ceremony presided over by Judge Magistrate David Schultz, who did a really nice job, but we had 20 or 25 new citizens of the United States on that day, and many great stories. So great program, and it's great to have our school district sponsor that so that some of our young people can see the citizenship ceremony and learn more about that aspect of being Americans. I missed it. Thursday, May 11th was Taste of Edina. Did anybody get to that? As Member Staunton mentioned, I was also out of town for the Historic Country Club tour, but I have done that before. It's really interesting and informative, so I do recommend that people get out there for it. Coming up, on Wednesday the 17th, some high school students are sponsoring what's called a Unity Walk at the high school at 2:10 in the afternoon. On Saturday the 20th, as has been mentioned, there's Kids to Park Day, and there is a photo challenge associated with that. I encourage people to do that. On Monday, May 22nd, there's a planning session for the future of Fred Richards Park. That's at 6:30 on Monday, May 22nd at the Public Works Building. I encourage everybody who has an interest to get out there for that. And then coming up, I'll be assisting in the interviews of some future members of our boards and commissions from among our high school student group. I love doing this. The young people in this community, we just have such a remarkable pool of talent. So it's great fun to interview the adults when we get the chance to do that. It's also great fun to interview the students when it's their turn. And then upcoming, of course, on Monday, May 29th is Memorial Day. Thank you for all who have served our country, and we salute you. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I also enjoyed Dr. Dressen's retirement party. It is really bittersweet to have him leaving. I'm happy for him. I think he gets to move on to a new adventure, but I'm really going to miss the guy. He's been a terrific partner with the city and with me. I just hold him in the highest regard. But we'll get to celebrate him again, I think, on the 24th of May at the annual Chamber of Commerce event. So I would encourage any of you that can get over there at noon on the 24th to help celebrate Dr. Dressen. On the 6th, I did highway cleanup. By the time I got over there, there was nobody to help me clean up below City Hall. So I spent a couple hours doing that, found an array of hubcaps and metal objects and all kinds of stuff down there that I stacked up on the highway. Well worth it, though, to have it cleaned up right below City Hall. And then the Days of Remembrance, Councilmember Stewart and I were there on Sunday the 7th. Had two great speakers, one on the Holocaust, one about genocide, both very compelling women. Regional Council of Mayors meeting was on the 8th, had an emphasis on the environment. They had some good speakers there as well. On the 9th, some of the MLC mayors met with Jamie Tincher, who is the Chief of Staff for Governor Dayton, on issues that were of concern to us, including that small cell technology bill, which continues to have life, apparently. I got an email on it today, and they're still trying to work out the language of that, which makes me a little bit anxious due to the potential consequences for us of not being able to recapture our costs or control the right-of-way and direct where they could put their poles and anything else. Member Staunton may have something to add on this. On the 10th, Manager Neal and I had lunch with the new Richfield mayor and the city manager, and had a good conversation with them. That same morning, did the Concord walk and bike to school. That's 20 minutes of mayhem from 8:20 to, or 8:15 to about 8:45. It is just, you forget how much energy all these grade school kids have, and they come on their bikes and walking. It was a lot of fun. And then, let's see, on Friday was the start of the Garden Council plant sale. Rushed over there and picked out a bunch of plants. I encourage anybody that hasn't been over there to buy plants from the Garden Council, do that next year. Middle of May every year they have this great sale, and it's well worth it. And then on Saturdays, Member Staunton mentioned we had the Historic Walk and Country Club, and I started out the day with the Mayor of St. Louis Park at the Edina Youth Climate Summit. We helped kick that off with a little panel, and then I went back over in the afternoon, and Member Staunton was part of that particular panel, and that was a really well done panel, and congratulations to you for being such a worthy participant. There were about 5 people, I think, on the panel, including Tara Brown from our staff, who did just an excellent job. It was Tara's reality check for everybody, and sort of pushed to get us all going. So I know yesterday that Member Staunton and Member Stewart, they had received some information about what time the National Law Enforcement Memorial Day ceremony was and got there a little bit late. So all of the people in dress uniforms were gone.
We saluted the flag, just the 2 of us together, an hour after the flag raising ceremony.
So, well, the chief and I and the deputy chief, and we all got in line and had our march and did the Pledge of Allegiance. But I think more importantly on National Law Enforcement Memorial Day is to recognize the fact that every day in the United States, 900,000 peace officers get up and go to work. And last year, 2016, 143 of them died in the line of duty. And 64 of them died by gunfire, which was a number that was up 50% over the year before. And 21 of those attacks were ambush-style attacks. And I think, and I mentioned to folks on yesterday that what worried us with respect to that October incident that we had on Xerxes Avenue with Larney Thomas was that it was coming, that incident came even though there was nobody hurt, which was due to the great work of Detective Tim Olson and his patients, that that incident was coming on the heels of a lot of heated anger all over the country. Policemen being shot in Baton Rouge, policemen being shot in Dallas on ambush-style attacks. And I know in Des Moines was a little bit after that meeting we had in October, but also in early October was Palm Springs. 2 people died in Palm Springs.
And Falcon Heights, Minnesota?
Yeah, and on the heels of Jamar Clark and Philando Castile. So what I told folks was that what we were trying to do was to make sure that we kept them safe, just like they keep us safe every single day. And that if we made any mistakes in the way we tried to keep them safe, I wanted to know that we were sorry about that and apologized to them for that, and told them that they have our undying respect. The work that they do every day is work that's involves a dedication of their lives to something bigger than themselves. And they don't talk about their deeds, the good deeds they do every day. And their heroism is done totally without celebrity. And we really appreciate and respect, Chief, and all your folks that work for you, although 52 of your officers, the courage that they show day to day, the strength that they show day to day, and they need to know that we have the greatest respect for the work that they do. So thank you on behalf of your entire department. And I know that some of the things I tried to say the other day were being drowned out by traffic noise, but that was the message I was trying to convey.
Mm-hmm. And Your Honor, I wanted to thank you for coming out yesterday, and it was unfortunate between the road construction and just the road noise. It was very difficult to hear everything that you were saying, but I do appreciate you coming out. I appreciate your comments tonight. Last fall we had a very difficult situation for all of us, and there was things that were done and said that a lot of the officers felt a lack of support. and that was pretty detrimental to the morale of our police department. But I just want to relay a message that, you know, as the chief, I just want to assure you that your police department is made up of highly trained, professional, and dedicated officers who hold themselves accountable to having the highest level of service to our community. So, and on behalf of our officers and our dispatchers and support staff, I do want to thank you for addressing this concern and expressing your support. It means a lot to us, so thank you.
Thank you. Nice. I tender that support on behalf of our entire council, I'm sure. So, all right, that's all I had. Manager Neal. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have two things. The first one is that we have had a couple of attempts at scheduling something new this year with regards to our liquor store, a business update or a business meeting for the council to become more familiar with the operations of our liquor enterprise. We've tried this at a couple of attempts at work sessions, and it just tails off and it gets supplanted by something more immediate. So what we'd like to try to do is schedule a meeting opportunity for those of you that are interested and can make it, that we can provide this opportunity for you to get a better look inside the operation and see how it's functioning. And the first one of those we've taken a stab at is May 26th at 10 o'clock in the community room upstairs. I believe that is a Friday. And then we want to do a little bit more connection with you to figure out when we could schedule more of a standing quarterly board meeting for council members to get a better understanding of that. But that's a date we've identified that we think can work, and would like to just to put that out there. We'd be scheduling it as a meeting of the council, as a work session. So it would be a public meeting, so people from the public could attend if they wish to know a little bit more about.
The 26th at 10 o'clock?
Yeah, in the community room.
Works for me.
It works for me.
Great. We'd love to have you, and we'll try to keep it to an hour. The second thing I wanted to tell you about is just to give you an update on residential redevelopment numbers. We're recently kind of putting together those numbers for 2016. It takes a little while for things to shake out in terms of what counts in 2016 and what counts in 2017. But the numbers for 2016 were that we had 93 what we would call residential redevelopment projects completed in 2016. And the definition of a residential redevelopment project is a new home built on a parcel where an old home was raised to make room for. I mean, that's kind of the conventional definition of that. But there were 93 of those in 2016. There were 109 in 2015, and there were 116 in 2014. So it's edging down just a little bit. The average value of the house that was raised was $354,000, and the average value of what replaced it was just over $1 million, $1,062,000. So a 3x increase in tax base. During the time period where we have kept stats on residential redevelopment from 2018 to 2016, there are 668 examples of residential redevelopment projects in Edina. The average is 400 of the the house that was raised. The average estimated market value was $409,000. The average estimated market value of what replaced it was $1.1 million, so a 2.74 escalation in value. The bigger number, though, for those 668 homes, residential redevelopment homes, 668 of them, is that they have added $422 million to the estimated market value of our city. And I think it would be good to just give you a comparison of what that is, because that number is bigger than the entire estimated market value of cities in Minnesota, most cities in Minnesota, including Falcon Heights, which is estimated market value in 2016 was $384 million, and Jordan is $388 million, and Excelsior is $411 million. So those 668 homes in Edina create more estimated market value than those entire city estimated market value. it's really a very significant impact to our tax base and to our taxpayers.
You've caused me to think about something else I wanted to ask you about, and that is, I've had a few folks ask me lately, how are the liquor stores doing? And
that's what we want to tell you about. Yeah, they're doing. We've made some operational changes on really the operating side, the expense side of the operation that have produced some positive changes in our cash flow, and we really want to talk to council more about what some of those are and what's coming up.
All right. Little sneak preview there. All right.
I have one. Sure. Thank you. I have one more thing. We have not had a chance to do our new team picture of the council since you were seated with new member Fisher. So we would like to do that at your next council meeting on June 6th.
How about right now?
We don't. No. Not prepared.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it was good enough.
So June 6th, I want to give you notice so you can have the right suit and the hair and makeup, whatever you have to have done.
Can we just do a caricature sketch?
We'll do this on June 6th at 5:30 immediately prior to, and we'll do it right here in these council chambers. How about that?
All right.
It'll be great.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other business
That's
for
all-
the council? We
that's-
got a little bit of HRA work to do.
Yeah, that's all.
We'll adjourn the council meeting. Calling to order the Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for the City of Edina, Tuesday, May 16, 2017 at 10:22 p.m. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Brundle.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Staunton.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. We've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us for the HRA. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the meeting agenda. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Consent agenda items, the minutes. Somebody care to move
I'll
those
move
minutes?
the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the items on the consent agenda. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And then the only other item we have is, requires no action, but it's just a project update by Bill Neuendorf, our Economic Development Director, on the Market Street project.
Yes, sir, thank you. Just a brief update tonight. I'm happy to answer questions as well. But as you know, for the last several weeks and last several months, we've been working with our development partners to refine some of the details on this Market Street redevelopment. We are still aiming at having all the details ready to go on June 20th. We've got a lot of work finished and we still have much more to do. So the purpose of tonight's update was just to keep you in the loop as we make some forward progress on some of these issues. There's a memo that I included that really starts to better tell the story of what this project is. You know, the expansion of the north parking ramp, which is a publicly owned asset. It's owned by the HRA today. It will be expanded by the HRA, and it will be owned by the HRA in the future. That's about an $11 million project. When we make that investment, that allows the center ramp to be sold and redeveloped and put back on the tax rolls. That's the project that has the apartments, the retail space on the first floor, all centered around that big public plaza and that WUNRF, the pedestrian alleyway system. That's about a $74 million project, and the developer has requested tax increment financing to help fund that project. There are extensive public costs on that one. So they are requesting approximately $10 million in tax increment financing. So that's why the HRA is preparing a redevelopment agreement on this site. So also in the packet is a memo from Nick Anhut, one of our financial advisors at Ellers Associates, because questions always come up about tax increment financing. There's usually two levels of questions. What is TIF? What does it mean to me? And then a little bit more astutely, is TIF appropriate? Are they asking for too much? Do they deserve it? Is the amount proper? Are they overpaying? Are they over-subsidized? So there's a very lengthy memo that walks through how Ehlers and Associates does their analysis on our behalf. Ehlers does work exclusively for municipalities. They do, while they have great expertise in development finance, they do not work with private sector clients. They only work for public sectors. So they are the folks that we rely on to really test the numbers. And in this development project, since the HRA owns the property and are seeking a true partner in this, our partners have been very open with their books, more open than most any developer will be, so that we can really test their numbers and make sure that we're not over-subsidizing the project. So that there's a memo there for you. Certainly when we get to June 20th, we'll have more detail and a little bit more colorful charts to help explain it a little bit better. But I didn't want to dump a 400-page report on you at the last minute. So we may also have another update at our early June meeting, again, just to kind of keep you in the loop so that you can absorb it and digest it a little bit more readily. And I think just the last two things I wanted to make note of are, with this north parking ramp, we intend to engage the architectural firm of Mohagan Hansen to actually design that property for us. So at your June meeting, we intend to have a design proposal for you. That work is important. It's very important that it gets started early, because we're still looking to see if we can minimize the traffic impact and the parking impact during the holiday seasons. And so in order to do that most effectively, we want to see if we can do some prep work for this north ramp, possibly as soon as August 1st of this year. So if we want to meet that goal and lower the burden during the busiest shopping season, we need to get the architects under contract and get them working. And then finally, we've also discussed at length affordable housing. We have met with our colleagues at the Edina Housing Foundation in an attempt to bring some greater clarity to the affordably priced units here. The Housing Foundation does recommend that we actually raise the bar a little bit more than was recommended by the Planning Commission and the City Council when they gave the preliminary approvals. They suggest, and I believe staff supports, that they still provide 10% of the units, but rather than just providing all one bedrooms, they also provide a couple 2 bedrooms. While we believe that better meets the intention of our affordable housing policy, it comes at a price. It adds another $400,000 in lost revenue to the project. So there's additional detail in here, but that's, I just wanted to update you on that because we've been trying to shrink that number, but as we've continued to refine it, that number is growing, not shrinking. We think we have a solution. If you have any concerns, let me know. But those are kind of the highlights of where we are today. We still have a lot more to work on. We're meeting with the developers and their attorneys on almost a weekly basis now, and we look forward to bringing you the full packet in late June. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Member Staunton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report, Bill, and I look forward to more of the updates. One of the things I just wanted to highlight about this is, you know, we had an elaborate discussion at the land use, or I should say the City Council had an elaborate discussion at the land use review on this about the height, the six-story height. And I think folks should be mindful of the fact that one of the advantages of having tax increment financing here is we get a look under the hood. And there was this discussion about, do they need to have 6 stories in order to make this work? And just the little bit I've reviewed the Ehlers analysis, it shows that in fact they do. And frankly, they're a little skinny even at that 6-story height. So it's just it's one of the things that a benefit of having the TIF application is we get to see these finances, and so folks who are concerned about that can be reassured that it's necessary to have this much density and height in this area to make this project work.
Good. Anything else? All right. Thanks for sticking around to give us that report.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Anything else for the HRA? HRA stands adjourned.